And it is now 6:30. So shall we get started? Okay, I'd like to call this September 12th, 2022 meeting of the Select Board to order. And since this is a hybrid meeting with one of our Select Board members remote, I'd like to have a roll call vote to acknowledge who's here.
Okay, Mr. Dane?
Present.
Ms. Escobedo?
Present.
Ms. Hartman?
Present.
Mr. Johnson?
Present.
And myself, Ms. Ackerman, present.
Okay, now for the first order of business, consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda as shown in the packet.
I have a second?
Yes, second.
Okay, and roll call vote.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
Okay, now to the town manager's report.
Thank you and good evening. For those of you who don't know, today is the 387th birthday of the town of Concord.
Woohoo!
So I didn't know that until this
I
morning.
didn't know that.
Proclamation.
Well, I didn't know until this morning.
Ah.
Well, I
had
think
forgotten.
it should be 387.5, right, that we do, and then 400. That's only 13 years away until we have the 400th.
Are you still
So
going to
just
be
as
on the
soon as we
select board
catch our
then?
breath from the
13
no.
years.
Not unless we go back to 18th century approaches to the select board.
All right, maybe I should have saved that announcement till the end of the report. So just looking at the two reports that are in your packet, I'm going to start with the one from September 2nd first. We have kicked off the employee classification and compensation study. We're working with a third-party vendor, GovHR. This is a group that has done a lot of this work really across the country and quite a bit of work in Massachusetts in the last several years. We had 3 employee meetings last week. We offered in-person and hybrid, and we had very good attendance at those meetings. In response to some issues we've had with Zoom over the last couple of weeks, the staff in the town manager's office has been working with various departments to review best practices and security tips for Zoom meetings, and we will continue that on a periodic basis. I'm pleased to announce that in our police department, Cara Palladino and Derek Rodriguez, 2 officers were appointed as detectives on August 29th. Both of these individuals serve as school resource officers, and they will continue doing that in addition to their duties as detectives. These 2 individuals, as the school resource officers, conducted ALICE training at the schools over the last couple of weeks. And we have information for anybody who's interested in that. I think most people know ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. Let's see, we had 99 calls for service during this period in our fire department, including 1 assistance through the State Hazardous Materials Team by Officer Firefighter Todd Nemi for the city of Worcester for a hazmat incident. The fire department was awarded $98,000 in an aid to firefighters grant for portable radios. That grant was written by our assistant chief, Walter Latta, who will be here later this evening for the update for the fire department. This is the 2nd year in a row that the assistant chief has successfully written a grant for the town of Concord.
Okay.
We have our 2nd Housing Production Plan Forum scheduled for this Wednesday, September 14th. Pre-registration is required. The Friends of the Library, in partnership with the Concord Conservatory of Music, hosted a very successful concert on Saturday in conjunction with Ag Day. And I've heard that the attendance was very high. We have a new staff member in the library, a custodian, Connor Valieri. and he will be working weekends for us. An announcement that Jason Bulger, our Chief Technology Officer, effective September 1st, has taken over management and oversight of Minuteman Media Network. This is part of a restructuring that I'm told actually started under the former town manager. This is something that we think is great for the organization and particularly helpful, as our public information officer, who had previously overseen that operation, has transitioned to a new role within the town. We also have an announcement of a new GIS program manager, Neil Fotheringham. There's some information about his background in the packet. Very impressive. He worked for both the state of Texas and at the county level in Arizona on some major initiatives in those different areas. New staff member or a couple new staff members at the Beatty Center. We have a new aquatics program manager, Mary Holland, and a new general manager at Beatty, Kathy Ellis. There's some information in the packet on their backgrounds. We're both happy to have both of those individuals coming on board. The Beatty Center had been closed for a week. This is a couple of weeks ago now. Each summer, the center closes down for a week and our facilities staff undertakes lots of different maintenance projects that really can only be done when the center is closed. And then just quickly moving to the report from last week, we had a successful state primary election and local election on September 6th. The information is posted online on the results of the election, and I sent a memo out earlier to you this afternoon announcing that Michael Bordanka, one of our detectives, was recently appointed to the position of sergeant. And then let's see, in conjunction with the town's birthday celebration and the 20th birthday of the Concord Visitor Center, the Visitor Center staff is offering complimentary tours at 1 p.m. each day to Concord residents who are interested in those. That is through this Saturday. And I think I will leave it there and ask if there are any questions.
Okay, any questions for the town manager? Yes,
Yeah,
Mary.
I have a quick question too, actually. Now that Jason, I've noticed that on YouTube, there's a lot more videos available of town meetings. For a while, it was hard to find them, and I've noticed that they're more available now. So I'm glad to see that. And I'm assuming that's because Jason took over, and I hope that continues.
Did you say town meeting?
Town meetings.
Meetings.
You mean committee meetings? Good.
Committee meetings,
Great.
yeah, town committee meetings.
Yes.
Because it was hard before to find.
Yes,
and
it was.
So that's great. I'm glad to see that. I do have a question. I remember 2 weeks ago, we talked about having information about housing as far as, is there a backlog as far as what's available for affordable housing? Do you remember that conversation we had? And I'm wondering when we can expect to see that?
So I do remember talking about that, and I think we decided that it would be a good opportunity for Liz Russ to come in and provide an update.
Okay. Okay, I thought it was more of what I envisioned was more of just a report, like maybe a monthly report that shows how much we have in backlog as far as what could come online for affordable housing. I don't.
Yeah, I interpreted your request as a request for her to actually discuss this with us, because I assume we'll have questions.
Okay.
Also, since she is planning to come in anyway next week,
Is
I
she?
think that, yes.
So if
that-
we could have that as part of it, that would be great.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that that's on the agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Are you talking about an inventory of available affordable housing?
Yes, well, actually, what I was thinking of is how many do we have now, and what are some potential houses we could bring, units we could bring online in the backlog, and what would be the, what would we need to do to make that happen?
Right, so that's the kind of the most critical item.
An inventory and maybe the size of the waiting lists?
So Mary, I wonder if Mary is thinking about what's in the pipeline.
That's the thing,
That's
it's
the
units
word.
in the pipeline
That's the
that
word.
could
I use
potentially help
backlog.
bridge any future gap in the 10%
What's in the
affordable
pipeline?
threshold.
That's the word.
So would that come from the building department? What's in the pipeline?
Well, no, our Regional Housing Services Office will be aware, I believe, of what affordable units are in the pipeline. And they're of course actively involved in the housing production plan, which in part is trying to solve that same problem. So since this is a kind of an overlapping thing, that's why we suggested that she speak to it
Okay.
next
I
Monday.
don't remember that, but that's fine.
Yeah. Terry.
I have a quick question. Congratulations to Sergeant Radinka. And it says here that he's temporarily promoted to acting sergeant. So I was just wondering, was there a sergeant that resigned or is there a reorg or?
So we have a sergeant that's out on IOD, injured
I see,
on duty and likely to retire.
I see.
And Mike Bordenka is next in line.
Okay.
And so it was a good opportunity to give him this experience on a temporary basis, but we do expect that it would be a permanent appointment in the next several months or so.
Thank you.
Yeah, it says he's first in line here.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for the town manager? Okay, just for my chair's remarks, just a couple of things. First of all, the Ag Day, 4 of us were there at various times, and I think we noted that it was a very successful event.
Yes. It's fine.
And I mean, the weather was perfect. Everything was perfect for that event. And then secondly, I just would encourage people to turn out next month at the Discover West Concord Day, which is October 15th. And I believe that our select board is planning to have a table there as well to try to recruit potential town board and committee members.
Can that be put on the town calendar or on the announcements on the landing page? I had a lot of, you had mentioned that, and I had a lot of trouble finding the actual information on the web.
About the event in the
Yes.
town calendar. Yeah, I mean, I think that it is kind of one of those things where we do have to define a limit to, well, what kinds of things do we include versus not? Because, I mean, it could turn into a massive event calendar. There are other event calendars published by other organizations in
Like
town.
Porch Fest is another
Exactly.
quasi-town event on September 24th. so-
Yeah, so that is an interesting point, and I think it would be helpful for sure. And then I also just wanted to acknowledge the receipt of, at this point, I think about 43 emails or notes regarding the middle school since last Thursday, approximately when the middle school building committee meeting ended. I think we will try to find a way to bundle those up and include them in the packet for the next meeting. And you know, though they have been received too late this week to include in this week's packet. And then I think that's it.
So about the minutes, did you see that?
Oh, well, I did, and I sent a note specifically
Okay.
to 2 members of the select
Okay.
board. We are still looking for completion of minutes that you all signed up for, so that we can eliminate the backlog of missing minutes that we have. Linda, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding the 43 emails from the public that you acknowledged, I think in the past, when we've had such a quantity, we try to take a representative sample and include in the next packet so that it's just more manageable for everybody.
Uh-huh. Okay.
It's just a suggestion in terms of what.
Yeah. It's always a trick to decide what's representative. Okay, but all right. Then I believe that it's approximately 6:45, so I believe that we're ready to reopen the public hearing for the transfer of liquor license and pledge of inventory and pledge of license from Dino's to the DBA.
Okay, move to reopen the public hearing for a transfer of liquor license, pledge of inventory, and pledge of license from Dino's GMAA LLS DBA Dino's Cuisina and Pizzeria, located at 1135 Main Street to RK Earth Corp. DBA Dino's Cuisina Corporation.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Thank you. And roll call vote.
Okay, Mr. Dane,
Aye.
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
Thank you. And so who do we have representing the applicant? Please come forward, announce yourself and your role with the organization, and we'll proceed with the hearing.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Rafael. I'm representing RK Earth Corporation at Dino's Cuisina, and I applied for a transfer from Maria, who's the owner of Dino's, to RK Earth Corporation.
Okay.
Transfer of the liquor license.
And welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay. And so I think that last time we just had a couple of items that were either missing or had some open questions about them. I think that right before the last meeting, we received most of those items. I believe also in the interim, we've received the police report that doesn't indicate any issues regarding the license holder or the applicant. So I didn't know if the board members had any other items related to this application that they'd like to discuss. Yes, Henry.
The paperwork is still a little bit on the haphazard side, but I think those are really issues for the applicant and not for us. There's some inconsistencies in the lease and so on, but that doesn't trouble me. The only thing that I think is worth looking at is, in fact, Chief O'Connor's or Detective Harrington's report that does indicate two violation matters
Okay.
for the applicant. That he says there are multiple in-house entries for Mr. Clip Borges. Is that the applicant?
Yes, that's myself.
And one from 2017, and one from 2020. And the only one that really I think they are fairly routine, but the one that does concern me is the continuing to operate after the expiration or termination of a license.
This was the one, this was down at 9 Acre Corner.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
and I
that's-
believe that we had a prior whole set of discussions about that as a board.
We did.
Yes.
We did. And, but, just coming up on the report, I think is something that I'm concerned that if I'm not concerned about things like employees drinking after hours. That's pretty routine and things of that kind. But I am concerned about a question where a licensee has been notified that license is terminated or is expired and continues to operate.
Yes, but I thought that we had a process last time where that suspension was resolved, right? And I just feel like at that point, to me, it's a resolved matter, but I guess you're saying that prejudices some subsequent application.
I think it's something to be noted at least. And I think to make the point that compliance is something that we take seriously.
Well, I would agree. I would imagine that whole experience may have had an impact for you. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yes, it did. And there was a miscommunication by that time. When I submitted for a renewal, I submitted the check in the town of Concord. They did cash the check. We went this before like a couple of times back and forth. And in fact, I got my license back, for Rossini's. Yeah. And I think we got those resolved because it was a miscommunication between myself and the town of Concord. Back
Yeah, I
that
mean,
time, it was like the
I don't
same
want to
people that was
reopen
like-
that whole issue,
No,
but
that's not-
I
if-
remember it being a little more complicated than that.
But if he's willing to sit here and address it, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions regarding this application? Okay. Then I'd like to move to close the public hearing. Well, actually, before I do so, I'd like to ask, are there any comments or questions from the public? And if you're on Zoom and you have anything, just use your raised hand function and identify yourself. And okay, I am not seeing anyone either in the room or on Zoom, so I'd like to move to close the public hearing.
Yep, move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Could I
Okay,
have a roll call vote?
Mr. Dane,
I,
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
Okay. So then, is there any further discussion regarding this approval or not? Okay, so then I'd like to take a
Okay,
motion to
Move
approve.
to approve the application as submitted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Mr. Dane,
I,
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we're a little early for doing the next public hearing. So, and I also don't want to compromise any time for the other two major topics that we have. I guess we should just go ahead with committee nominations and appointments.
Okay, nominations are Eve Eisenberg, 833 Old Road to 9 Acre Corner, to the Community Preservation Committee, Carleen Hempel, 50 Highland Street, as Town Representative to the River Stewardship Council.
Okay, thanks. And committee appointments?
And if I may, I just want to explain what that River Stewardship Council is,
Sure.
because this is a new appointment from the Select Board. It's the Sudbury, Assabet, and Concord Wild and Scenic River Stewardship Council. So, yeah, it's part of the Suasco Rivers system. So it's related to, what I think of as ORS, the Organization of Assabet River Stewards. Anyway, we're really delighted that Carleen has volunteered to be our town representative. Each town in the council has a representative. So this is a great opportunity for us to be represented.
Okay, thank you. And that water system is crucial to our whole region.
Yep.
Correct.
Now, we have about 6 minutes.
do we?
We're gonna do
we have to
appointments?
vote on the
Oh, the
appointment?
appointments, excuse
Yeah,
me.
let's do the
Right,
appointments.
move to appoint Robert Andrews of 32 Staffordshire Lane to the Commission on Disability for a term to expire April 30th, 2025.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote?
Roll call vote, Mr. Dane,
Aye.
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and Ms. Ackerman, aye.
Okay, now I think we might be able to do a liaison report or two before 7 o'clock. If anyone has one they'd like to offer.
Sure, I'll go. I have two quick. Trails Committee met. The stewards come in and they're out there looking at the trails, and this year there's a lot of down trees because of the drought, so that was bad. That's kind of bad news. The other thing is the NRC. As you recall, the town has appropriated about 2.4 million for the dredging of Warner Pond, and they put out an RFP, and it came back with an estimate of 9 million.
9 million?
Yes, so we got to go back. That wasn't funny. I shouldn't laugh.
We could go out there with some shovels.
Are you volunteering?
Yeah,
So we've got to
9 million.
rethink that, yes. So
Wow.
it was, yes.
Wow.
That's all I have.
Wow.
Sorry.
Thanks a lot.
Sorry.
Anyone else would like to, so Terry?
I have a number of items, but I can be fairly quick.
Sure.
So I did attend a meeting remotely with a group of people and DHCD person Kate Racer about the Junction Village project. And a number of us have sent follow-up questions through Kerry that are going to go, then I think through Liz, back to the DHCD as follow-ups from this meeting.
Great.
The Transportation Committee needs a new member, and it's becoming very active now. Concord Academy came before them to talk about how they're creating a new art center, which is going to eliminate 57 parking spaces that are on the Concord Academy campus. And they're hoping instead that the people who park there will park on Main Street. So
Wow.
this is something that we all are going to have to think about.
How many did you say? Terry?
57.
57,
And they're hoping,
right. So,
that doesn't, you can't hope a parking space.
well, I did encourage them to talk with several groups, including Economic Vitality Group, because I think the businesses might have some, there's a lot to think about with this.
Well, I assume the planning board will deal with
Planning
that.
board,
Yes.
yeah, definitely, or maybe the zoning board. There's a lot to this.
I mean, I know that since, though we had discussed moving from parking minimums to parking maximums, that we haven't done so yet, and that they would have some parking minimums.
But I do like the idea of hoping parking spaces.
All right.
Okay, another thing the Transportation Committee did was, there was a sidewalk sale in August, and they had a booth where they surveyed people who came along, and the biggest obstacle to transportation, way bigger than anything else, is Route 2. Crossing Route 2 was the top of everybody's list. Also, they are working with the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Safety Subcommittee and the Friends of Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. There is going to be this Thursday a working group of all 7 towns from the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail getting together to try to recreate uniform rules such as, things about e-bikes, etiquette, right-of-way, and signage. Apparently 15 years ago, they agreed on uniform rules, but the signs are different, e-bikes weren't in existence. They need to do it again. So this is exciting, all 7 towns coming together. Also, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. Marcia has been working with staff on the Junction Park, as she promised us, and she's going to report to the Select Board October 3rd. There is a plan that they are working on that looked pretty comprehensive for the short-term plan. Construction is resuming on the final phase of the bridge across Route 2. So there's a reminder for everybody, this part of the trail is not officially open yet, and it's going to be dangerous during construction. So if you do go on it, which you're not supposed to do, be very careful about the construction. They also opened the bids for constructing the last half-mile from West Concord down into Sudbury. And DOT anticipates that the award will be going out in the next few weeks. A couple other things are that the PEG Access Media, Minuteman Media is working with the publicity subcommittee of the 2025 Executive Committee. They're planning to work, with that committee. And they're also working with the consultant on the Comcast franchise renewal, which will come before this board. And finally, the Personnel Board has been very active. They heard an appeal from a CMLP employee. They're working hard on the classification study. They moved, the Personnel Study Task Force moved the employee forum to next Monday. This
Next
is-
Monday.
Okay, at 1 PM at CMLP, and then they will report to the select board on October
October
3rd.
3rd. Yeah.
And I will not be at that meeting on October 3rd, but I've heard it. It's a very comprehensive report. It's huge. So most of it's appendices, and it was compiled by Anita Techley. So we'll be hearing more about that. That's the end of my report.
Okay, thanks very much, Terry and Mary, for your liaison reports. And now it is 7 o'clock, so I'd like to proceed with our next public hearing for West Concord Tavern.
Right. Here we go. Move to,
Oh, do we need to open the do we have a public hearing for this?
I don't think so.
I think
All
we
right,
just-
then this
Okay.
is simpler.
approve.
All right.
So then, all we need to do then is to discuss whether there are any issues with the application, and did anyone have any objections?
It's all in order, I think. It's
Okay.
all signed off. It has conditions on it.
Yeah, the usual
But, and of course, if we vote to approve it, I
with the
actually may
conditions.
note that they need to comply with the conditions
Right.
on it.
Right, but we don't have any further conditions that we'd like to
Yeah,
set.
well, I would like to make sure that they stay open at least until 11 o'clock as the 99 did, because it was the last refuge in town.
I see.
I do have a question.
Sure.
So,
Well, first of all, do we have someone to represent the applicant here?
Right here.
Thanks. If you could come forward and identify yourself. Actually, if you just give us a couple words too about your business. I think you've come to before us before.
Yes.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, we are going to stay open till 11 on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday for you. All right, and
Well, no, you have to do Monday too, because our meetings here run until 9:30 on Monday
we'll stay
nights.
open late on
No,
meeting day.
that's- And in
And I
fact,
just
fact,
wanted to-
Monday is the only night where you're gonna have enough parking, because Monday night Woods Hill Table is closed.
Yes, I saw that. Yes.
All right.
And then I just wanted to tell the select person that speaker is being removed this week outside. Yeah, I know that was one of the
Yes.
concerns, so
Yep.
that will be taken care of this
Good.
week.
Okay. Great.
I have another question. When are you going to open?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, last time you told us September sometime, but
Yeah, so we're just, we're doing a really good job, I think, with the building inspector, plumbing, electric, making it a nice, great, safe place to be. And so we've had some delays, and we've redone a lot of the electrical, plumbing, and structural. And
So how's that process going?
it's going really well. So we got great approvals today from building to move
Okay.
ahead. And so we'll be closing up the final phase of the bar renovation, ceiling, and dining room lounge ceiling. So,
so it sounds like October anyway.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Do we know where the application stands with the ABCC? Well, that's gonna be probably the last important milestone to reach.
From an application standpoint.
Well, and also in terms of opening.
Okay. All right. So any other discussion or question? Okay, then let's go ahead with
Okay.
the motion.
move to approve the common victualers license application submitted by West Concord Tavern LLC, doing business as West Village Tavern, located at 13 Commonwealth Avenue, subject to the conditions listed by the various town departments on the license application in tonight's packet.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
Okay, thanks very much, and we
much.
look forward
luck.
to invading your premises at some point.
great.
Okay. Now we're ready to continue the discussion of the middle school building project, which we began at a previous meeting. So I believe Pat Nelson was going to present. I don't know, Dawn, if you would stand in, or maybe Pat's online. We also got a presentation from Pat, so I think that we could put that up on the screen.
Because I don't like being alone, can I ask if Lori Hunter can join me?
She doesn't seem that
She's kicking me under the
enthusiastic,
table.
but-
Do you want to give them 5 minutes?
Yeah, it's actually the case, by the way, Dawn, that we are at this, here comes Pat.
There's Pat.
No, please,
Okay.
still come join. I mean, Pat.
So I have to say, we are 5 minutes ahead. So Pat, you're not late. You're not late. It's just that since this isn't a hearing, we can start early, but yeah. So welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be back.
And we're trying to bring up the presentation for you.
Okay, great, thank you. So, yeah, thank you for having us back. Sorry I am coming in,
You're not late, Pat.
short of breath and without my glasses, I think, so I'll do my best here. So, we heard you last time. We walked away from the meeting sort of thinking the select board wants more information about how we're making our decisions about value engineering. And it seemed like the select board had a lot of questions about the depth of the rigor of our value engineering. That was part of it. The select board very much wants to see an effort at, on the committee's part, to lower the cost of the project. So this presentation that was given to the building committee. Boy, it's hard to rush in here.
No, it's fine.
It is.
All right, you can take your breath.
It's fine. I think what we were hoping to do was, oh, I got you.
All uphill.
Was to remind the select board and the community decisions that were made to date on spaces, value engineering, and how we got to where we are for the schematic design project that was brought forward to the town. So just as a way of taking a step back, reminding everyone, back in May of 2021, there was substantial changes to the design that were put forth at the committee level to remove dedicated square footage for the makerspace and the alternative PE spaces. I don't have those square footage off the top of my head. I want to say the makerspace was around 1,000 and the alternate PE space might have been around 1,500-ish. Don't quote me. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. But in order to, because we heard loud and clear from the community about the increase in the gymnasium to have 2 cross-court MIAA basketball courts, as well as a 420-seat auditorium. So there were concessions made back in May, almost a year and a half ago, or a year, 15 months ago, to include those in the building at the, while cutting square footage that was intended to be educational spaces, because Lori and team, Lori, Justin, school leadership decided we can do our best to make those curriculum educational spaces done in other spaces so that we can afford this, knowing that the budget was tight. The last piece, and Matt, you made this motion.
Yeah.
I'm just realizing, was to review the building design to seek opportunities to simplify and lower total project costs. So with that, and the next slide, I think it's just a graphic representation.
But I think it's a good representation that shows what came out of the project. So things came out of the project and things went into the project. And for me, these graphic representations really make it easier for me to understand that that we worked very hard at that point. We knew that the addition of the gym and the auditorium was going to put pressure on the project, but we responded to the community and we did it. And then we worked really hard to make sure any spaces that we were removing, even though they would have been more desirable to keep in the alt PE space and the maker space, we were able to remove them. And then there were other square footage changes in the project back 15, 16 months ago.
Right. So just as a reminder, and also it's worth pointing out the gross square footage at that point 15 months ago was 145,959. We're now even smaller, 143,510. So there were efforts along the way to actually make the building smaller and more efficient as a, to the last point of the motion, to do the team's best to, reduce the size of the building and, to simplify.
Can I interrupt for a minute?
You may.
Can you correlate this to the budget? Like,
Yep.
at what point?
So at this
was
point-
after the 100 million?
Yes, this took us to that. So actually, that's
This
a
has
great
got you to 104.
segue. Thank you. Yeah, the next slide, I think, shows where we went with that. So that
Okay.
was in the spring. Yep. So then in the fall, the schematic design package was issued in October. So that put us on a square footage basis, which is basically what you do in feasibility leading into schematic design. You design based off of a cost per square foot until you have schematic design drawings. So at that point, we issued the package for estimating in October, a few months later. That allowed us to go into schematic design to figure out, push, pull the spaces, and that actually got us to a smaller building, but also to be able to add those other spaces in. So this is essentially a timeline of last fall that we reconciled the estimates in November, the schematic design estimates. We reviewed them. We also had value management at that point and saved almost $1 million at that point, which took us to the 103.7 for the article, essentially. So, and then in November, 1.7 savings total. So we were still last fall making value management decisions to get us to that number that was brought forward to the town. So with that, in the fall, leading into the new year, that was brought forth to the town. So we just want to remind everyone that the value management happened to get us to the schematic design budget. And from that point, we moved forward into design development this past spring. Nothing substantial changed in I just want to point out, schematic design cost estimates are budget numbers. Not everything's figured out. If it was, it would be put out to bid. There's another 1.5 years of drawing, almost 2 years of drawing after that. So at that point, you lead into design development. That took us to the spring, at which point, we are where we are, which is over budget. It's not because the design was enhanced, it was because of factors out of our control, which we spoke about at the previous meeting. So this was really just a reminder that the value management has been happening along the way. The process has been comprehensive. Quite a bit of discussion and decisions and debate happens to get to all of these savings.
Yeah, and the purpose of going through this is, what I heard last time we were here was a possible, and I may have heard wrong, and so please correct me if I'm misrepresenting what was said, but that there hadn't been a lot of work done on the value engineering. I think one of the members said that they hadn't seen evidence of significant value engineering that took place. And I think that, you could wait until you get you're in the design documents or you're further along to do your value engineering, but we started it up front because we knew that this addition of the gym and the auditorium was going to put pressure on the project. So a lot of the work was done beforehand. And I think this
So is it safe to say that you did a lot of value management, a lot of it, and a lot of discussions and a lot of vetting before the budget was approved?
Yes,
That's what you're saying? Okay.
yes.
Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, 1.7 million.
Very good.
Yes.
So the other piece of this is that we work very closely, of course, with our paid professionals. They're the ones that advise us on how we can best value manage the project, how we can best approach a building project that has already been designed. It's been designed to an ed plan. It's the architects and the owner's project managers who have the greatest amount of experience in how you can take this physical building and reduce the cost in it. It's the educators that have been advising us as to how we can maintain the vision and the educational scope of the building. So this is part of why it's taken so long. And there's been, again, I may be overly sensitive to this, but I've heard that, we've been working, we've been going over and over and over this, and we haven't gotten down to 103 million again. But it all has taken a great deal of painstaking time, asking the questions of our professionals and having the professionals bring us back options, and trying to keep us on a track that is reasonable based on what you can do with a building and what you can do with the ed plan.
Does that number include everything, site work, parking, athletic fields, construction,
It's all the,
utilities, equipment, furnishings, furniture, fixtures, demolition of the Sanborn School?
it's all in there. That's what's all in there now at
Does that
the high
include,
number.
At
does
the
that
overage.
include the $1.5 million for the feasibility study?
No,
No.
no.
Does
that
it
was
include the
It's a separate
cost?
warrant.
I assume that Peabody will be demolished eventually.
Doesn't include
doesn't include
Peabody
that.
at all.
We
That's
don't know
a
what's gonna happen
totally
with that.
separate.
But if
But
it were to
Sanborn,
be-
yes.
But if it were to be demolished, that would be an additional cost.
But not to this project. It's the town has to decide what they want to do with Peabody, as I understand it. And Matt, you can.
Yeah,
correct
and
me.
I mean, presumably that project also has assets that are separate of land, so I think it isn't appropriate to try to burden this project with the demolition costs of Peabody when we have no idea what's going to happen with that project.
So I think there's one more slide.
We know it's not going to stay there, though.
Well, it might.
Can I make a point about
Yeah.
Peabody? I'm sorry to interrupt. We've been really clear along the way because there was a lot of discussion about could that, the sale of that property offset some of this cost. The problem is we need to stay in that building until this building's built. So in order to borrow the money to build the building, we still need students attending Peabody. So that can't be surplus to the town until after the completion of the project.
No,
So
but
it's,
it could go into the sinking fund.
it could, yeah. So I'm just saying that from a offset and budget of this project, we have never assumed that any of that could contribute. But once it's surplused back to the select board and the town, it's an asset.
And then this last slide, I just wanted to kind of go back and I think we can go to, well, these are some of the things that got value managed out in that first round. And we don't need to go through the details. Henry Youth said when we last met, that it's not up to this board to give us, how the building should be designed.
I think that's right. I don't
yeah.
think we want to design the building. That's your job.
Yeah.
Our job is to deal with the
money.
financial
Right.
results. And
Yeah.
and if you look at the charge for your committee, it's clear that you are not charged with actually dealing with the financing or the budget for it. So that I don't think we're stepping on your toes by having a concern at this point about the impact on the tax rate and the resources of the town that are required to build the school that you design.
Absolutely.
So
And
I hope you understand that.
Well, I guess my point was that I don't think we need to go through all the details of what we've done or how the building's going to be designed, but totally the responsibility for you and for the finance committee and for us is to try to keep this as efficient a project as possible. I totally agree with that. If we could just go to the next slide. So
Yeah.
what we're trying to do on the next slide is just look at some of the current MSBA projects and what they are costing now. And I don't know, Lori, do you want to speak a little bit to this?
Or I can, sure.
Or Dawn?
Yep. So what's shown here up above, I think, are the smaller projects, the 575. So we're looking at
It's easier
current
to see.
projects. You can see there's elementary and then there's middle and a high school in the mix in Wakefield. Total project cost, that is our 103. That is what the town allocated at whatever their town meeting for the total project cost. That's construction plus soft cost. Their school enrollment, which we're 700, we're the bottom line. So we're 700. Right now we're showing the 107 because that's our overage minus the VE that has been decided to date. Our square footage, 143,510. I already mentioned that. You can see how it compares to the others. But then the cost per square foot is construction cost divided by square footage. And you can see that we are, of all the MSBA projects that are currently listed on this as comparisons, we're actually the lowest. A lot of, and what I'm seeing in my practice is closer to $700 a square foot than $600. And we're actually just below 600. Our budget ish. Again, it's
Are these other projects actually bid projects?
these are in construction.
So the thing is, we only have an estimate now. We don't know what the bids
That's
are
what they
gonna come
have.
in.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
They're-
is it possible that bids are gonna come in at 700 a square foot rather than 600?
It's I mean, anything's possible. What's that? Some are SD. Yeah. I know that they're,
Okay,
And
because
we
I'm just
can
wondering if we're being realistic about the per square foot costs.
yep. So all of these costs will, have the same level of scrutiny and estimators looking at forecasted numbers. So, nothing here is out of line with where we are. As far as hard bids, that was a question I put forward to the two estimators, Peter and Peter, back when we met with them at our committee. And they said they had, I think it was 6 or 7 projects being bid before we get our 60% next month. And we will certainly ask for that data as well, because those are real hard bid numbers.
Yeah, because
So Haverhill is probably the closest peer, if I look at this.
In size.
Yes, and so they're 139,000 square feet, about for 715 students. And so is this an MSBA funded?
Yeah.
these are all MSBA.
They all are except for us.
Concord.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so the MSBA is recognizing that the economy is where it is. And I think I brought this up last time, that they're actually not forcing designers to go back to and redesign projects, rather carry a list of things that, could get them closer to budget if the bids came in high. And that's unprecedented in my 25
I'm sorry,
years.
can you say that again? I
Yep.
didn't understand
So
that.
typically, the designer
Yep.
per contract, AIA standard contract, is contractually obligated to design to the budget. And what that means is if their project is estimated, the reconciled estimate comes in high, they are to work with the committee to bring it onto budget. That's no different in ours. We're following the same contracts, AIA standard contracts. Now, the MSBA would typically hold a hard line and say, nope, you have to make all the VE decisions that you need to make now in order to keep you on budget. What they're doing right now with projects that are coming in high is saying, you don't need to go back and change the documents to reflect those VE items. You just need to have a list of things that you can take out of the project if the budget, if the bids come in high or if you continue to trend high. It's just a recognition on their part that we're in unusual economic times.
But they're not increasing the amount of the MSBA. Right, okay.
No, they're at 360 something
So I
a
don't
square
understand.
foot, so no.
I guess I don't understand the significance of
It's
what you're
significant
saying.
because the MSBA doesn't typically ever acknowledge that they say if you're over budget, you have to change your project to be on budget, and it is what it is.
So now they're saying you can go back to the towns if you
Yep.
want to, or you can value engineer it.
That's right.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so that's somewhat unprecedented. The MSBA doesn't operate typically like that. They're very much a black and white. They're never gray. And this is them showing some gray colors.
But they're producing money.
Yes.
Hard
Well,
money.
some.
Not-
They only, of eligible costs, they only, cost per square foot, they're only at $360. And that's so that they can spread money throughout the state.
What is the number in our contract? You
Um,
say that the contract provides the architect to design to a number.
Yeah.
And so
The budget, the number is the
It's
budget.
80 million construction, it's 80 and change construction cost.
Which was what was originally voted.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what we did as a committee, when our design development number came in high, was to say to our designers, we understand that 60% construction is when those decisions need to get made. We are going to ask you to keep designing the building, keep going into construction documents, so we can run this parallel process of value engineering and see where the 60% comes in at.
So I've got maybe a stupid question, but let me see if you can help me understand something.
Sure.
If I were to design something in my home, I was going to redo the bathroom, okay? So I get some rough estimates of what it's going to cost to rebuild it, and then I get a budget and I get a loan and I have this amount of money. And then I go and talk to my contractor, and the contractor says, well, it's going to cost a lot more than that because you've designed some things in here that just cost more than you thought, right? And the other thing that's happening is that during that time, there's also inflation. So I would like to understand how much of the fact that we're currently 5 million over, and we might be more, I guess, when we learn the 60% mark, how much of that is because we just designed something that cost more than we thought it was going to cost? How did we know how much it was going to cost? Because we didn't, right?
We're being told that it's all because of supply chain increase in cost. Contractors not holding their numbers. They would typically say, oh, my number is good for X amount of time. No one's holding their numbers anymore. They're not saying that, oh yeah, my numbers are good for 90 days. They're saying 2 weeks tops.
But
Because no one
independent
knows.
estimators
So-
did look at the schematic design
Yeah.
and came up with those estimates, but of course they weren't detailed,
Right.
right? And so now with the construction estimates, there are more detailed estimates that can be made. But I think
You see
the
my-
question
you see
that
my-
you're asking is, how much escalation did the committee carry, and was that an appropriate amount given the current
That's one way of
market
asking it.
relative to what the estimators were estimating being, accurate?
And what I can say is that what we carried for contingency and escalation it's standard in the industry for the time. Here we are 6 months later. What's happening is there's numbers with contingency on top of contingency, which means I'm going to, because I'm being told, let's keep it simple. I'm being told something's going to cost me $500, but I think it's actually going to cost me $550. I'm going to hold that contingency of the extra $50. What we're doing now is saying, hold the $550 plus another $500 because we just don't know about the economy. So the numbers that we have in our estimates are inflated because no one knows what is going to happen because it's so volatile. Does that make sense? So at the
It does,
time,
but I thought when we approved the 100 million, the 102.7 million, right? We had contingencies
did.
in there, and
We
we
still
also
do.
had a $5 million COVID contingency in there.
no.
No.
Yeah, I think we did.
I'm
No,
confused.
Get a bidding
added
contingency,
We added a
2 million.
2 million, a 2.5% or 2 million bidding contingency on the construction.
Right, and I'm confused now.
As a bonus contingency, and even that
Right.
got blown through.
So that's what I'm trying to figure out now. I can't really see the slides, so if you guys could send them at the end of the
I think
meeting,
you
that would be
did. You
great.
sent them to Matt?
I sent them
It
to
sent to
Matt.
me,
Matt, so Matt
and
can share.
we got them just this evening.
Oh, okay, great, yeah. So I might be wrong on this, but the number that I thought the project was at now was 115 million, is that
Oh,
right?
no.
No, that's.
Okay, good.
So I
That
think
was a
that Pat-
recommendation to
Pat,
carry
what-
if we were to go to special
We're getting
town
close to
meeting, I
the
think.
budgeted time we have for this, so
sure.
we could inflate that. But if you could talk about what's been happening in the last few weeks.
Yeah, so at our last meeting, we gave a recap of what happened at the select board meeting with you guys, and we sent everyone the link and hoped that everybody would be watching it, and we hope we've got committee members watching tonight as well. And we started to go through our process again, but what we wanted to do was to kind of pivot from the going line by line and start to look at this in terms of the more expensive, the big items that we could start to identify that we would be able to either reject or accept as part of our value engineering, so that we could get closer to the number that we think we need to get to, which we still don't really know what that is. We know that there are the Henrys of the world who want to make sure we get down to the 103 million. There are the citizens in the town who want to make sure that they get the building that they want. And then there's somewhere in between.
So can you just say what number we are at? Because I'm getting really
Yeah.
confused, not having the slides.
107, oh my God, this is small.
Okay, 107.
107 and
So
change.
I don't know where I came up with 115.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you
it was-
did,
you did.
didn't you? Didn't
Okay.
make it up.
So 115, there was a vote
Pat
taken
brought that last,
in
2 weeks
the
ago.
building committee
Yeah,
to ask the select board to call a special town meeting with the possibility of having up to 115 million, with the idea that the motion made under the warrant article, or even the warrant article itself, might be less than that. So that was a kind of considered a
Oh.
worst case scenario type of
Yeah.
a number.
Is that what we're here to talk about tonight?
No, so we're not. So basically, here's what's happened.
Yeah, what's
I
happening?
mean, I'll
You
jump
go
in.
ahead, Matt.
So the committee has looked at additional value engineering items, as Pat mentioned, and with 3 different scenarios in mind. So one, which I think people have been calling scenario A, is just kind of the current scope with a couple of consensus cuts, okay? Fully consensus cuts. The second is scenario C, which the owner project manager put before us, which shows a budget that gets back to the construction budget that we had, you know, and plus the bidding contingency,
Correct.
I think is what he's done.
the 103,
So
yeah.
the total project cost would be 103 in theory,
because it has additional value engineering
based upon this
items in it?
30% estimate cost. And
So if I
because,
could.
and
if I
and
could-
though that cuts the size of the auditorium, it cuts the size of the gym,
Oh.
it cuts the net zero capability of the building by shifting from triple pane to double pane glass, and a number of other very significant changes in that have impact, for example, on maintainability of the building or longevity of the
Okay.
building.
Mhm.
Okay, so that it just shows there is a way to get back to the budget. It's
Okay.
just, you know, is that the kind of building that we were
Right.
expecting to build?
Right.
And then what the committee's focused on is achieving, I think, this so-called scenario B in between, which would be the recommended option
Mhm.
that the committee would push for, that would be somewhere between A and C.
Okay,
Okay, and that discussion proceeded to some degree at last meeting, but we didn't get far enough through it to come to this board meeting with that plan.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's in the air still, and the reason that tonight's meeting is not as consequential as it might have been,
Right.
is that if there was to be a special town meeting, we need specific dates to call that special town meeting, to open the warrant and all that.
Right.
And there wasn't enough time from this last meeting. We're just now getting confirmation. In fact, we still haven't gotten confirmation from the Finance Committee Chair whether the hearing date that we've proposed could be supported. And that date is pivotal, because then all dates leading up to that are back scheduled, and then all dates from there are forward scheduled. So because both of those things weren't finalized, this tonight's just an update. And next Monday is when we would expect that we would have that more substantive discussion of options, as well as potential special town meeting dates.
Thank you, Matt. I think you did a real good job with that.
Okay.
And Thursday, we have a meeting.
This
to-
Thursday,
oh,
we're
yes.
going to have another
okay.
Yes.
marathon
That was a
meeting.
great summary. I think I'm getting it now. So
Okay.
in scenario A, the current scope, is that then the 108 million?
That's the one that you're seeing, that 107.
It's 107 and change.
Right,
love
so the
numbers.
So it would
115
require a $5 million
was-
increase.
there is no scenario?
Well, so here's the other
Cushion.
problem. So
Cushion, Terry, and it was actually suggested by the chair of the finance committee that we didn't
Right.
want to go in without a cushion. So
Right, that's what I want to ask about.
Well, so this 30% estimate is not the final estimate.
Right. So what I want to ask about is, when we added a $2 million contingency last time that you recommended, Matt, and now, as you say, we've blown through it. And I'm thinking if we add another cushion, like you're saying, we could blow through that also pretty easily.
But it's not us blowing through it by saying, great, we now have this extra money, let's build some other
It's
stuff.
the contractors.
Thank
who-
you, Matt.
But it's the contractors who see, oh, town meeting voted X dollars, we can bid up to that number.
Well, I think you're seeing the per square foot costs of these other projects. I don't know.
I
that
don't know. I'm
that's
not seeing any
necessarily
of the
signal
slides,
we're
so
sending.
I think,
But,
I'm behind. I'm sorry. I'm trying to
Okay,
catch
well,
up here.
no, and.
But I don't think we want to actually call a special town meeting until we have a number that's going to be the number that will go.
Well, so
And-
here's the
and
the
the-
issue with that. So
Well,
the issue
I
with
know-
that is.
I know there's an issue with it, but it's still, I think it's a very important thing for us to know before we throw this out.
So if
And-
you wait until getting the definitive number that you would need to build the project to call special town meeting, by the time you hold the special town meeting and the town vote, that number is not going to be good anymore.
Well, it depends what you mean by definitive. If you mean,
90% estimate.
well, but we do need
That's
to know. what
that's the one
well,
you go to
We do
construction
need to
with.
know what the number is. If we're going to ask people to vote on it. And
So here's my
and
hope.
we also have to have some sense about whether this is just going to be an ongoing process as the cost keeps increasing for various reasons.
Well, so that's the reason not to delay. And so the question is, how can we best have the public informed when they're making these decisions, right? So the first is that the public hearing scheduled date, the reason that we're looking for that date is to have the 60% estimate in hand. So we'll know at that point whether the subsequent estimate shows another escalation in costs or whether it shows that they have flattened or something else. It's still not final, but then we could hold the special town meeting, and then it looks to me like the schedule of a town-wide vote would likely happen in early January, about the time that the 90% estimate would be received. So that I hope that the town can go to vote with that number, aware of that number, whether the thing they're voting on is going to be adequate to build
But
or not.
But if it's done as it was back in February, when it went to the polls, the people who went to the polls did not even know what the number was.
Well, that has changed as well since that time, thanks to Terry Ackerman.
Well, not exactly, because it still wasn't on the ballot. It was on some separate piece
Well,
of
it will
paper.
never be on the
That's the
ballot.
state law. This is
will
the
never
best
be
we
on the
can
ballot.
do, is to have a.
So
a
it will
pro and
be
a
on the
con.
handout. So, and there will be pro-con statements from representative organizations about whether to vote for or against this.
And they're mailed to every house, and
Are you saying the state law prohibits
yes.
the
Yes.
ballot from saying?
Yes,
Saying that,
Saying that the
Yes.
town meeting voted to authorize X dollars in borrowing, and we
well,
were
let's see,
asking
the
you.
original authorization didn't, it may be that the wording of the new one, actually, I see Mina Makarios on the Zoom. He may be able to comment on this. Mina, I don't know if throwing you on the spot here, if this comes to a vote for an incremental authorization, spending authorization for a townwide vote, would the amount of the incremental spend be on the ballot question? Because I know that we previously voted as a town to exclude the costs from, Prop 2.5. That was the townwide vote last time. It didn't involve money. That's the special town meeting vote had money. Okay, but what about the townwide vote this time?
This is the vote that's coming up, correct? Or
Well, we don't know if
would
it is,
come up
if it does
in the
come up
I don't know.
Yeah.
to authorize additional spending.
coming up
what would be
tonight
the
is what I
form of the question. What would be the form of the question?
that's a good question. I would have to know the difference in amounts, and it would be whether or not you're excluding that from debt as well. It would, however, have a similar summary as Terry mentioned, and the summary could certainly say the yes or no.
Well, it's certainly the summary, but that's a
Summary
separate
is
document. I think
in
what
the-
Henry is talking about is, I think we had the very first example of having this kind of handout at this this election that just happened. And I think that the public, first of all, is unfamiliar with this process, but second of all, at the polls where you could find this sheet versus, it wasn't necessarily all that clear.
Right.
And so I guess that certainly procedures could improve between now and January, but I just wondered again,
Right,
I think
so-
Henry's question is well put. Will the ballot itself indicate what
Right,
people
that's
are
our
voting
question,
on?
Mina, whether the law
effectively?
has changed so that we can put dollar amounts right
Well, and it
into
may be a
the
different kind of
ballot question. Because this is probably going to be a question to add something like 8 million or
3
5
million
million
or
or
something,
10
yeah.
million to the project as voted at a special town meeting in November or December. That would be the
It-
question.
it be-
Yeah, Terry, I'd have to double check.
Right.
The state law that governs the ballot questions has not changed. It certainly would be, since it would be my task to describe the summary of what happened or what is being asked in the ballot question, I would certainly expect that the summary includes it, even if the ballot
sure.
question does not require it.
Yeah.
So that's the answer. Sorry, I was still kind of getting up to speed where the conversation was as I was logging on. So.
Yeah, no, it's
And-
really
and
the
it
ballot
is-
question itself is the
And you asked
question.
if it would be excluded from Prop 2.5.
Well, look, how about this? Let's hear about that. If you could investigate that and we
Yeah.
could hear about it by next Monday, that would be good.
But
And
it would make the process more meaningful.
Yeah.
If indeed, not only did it state on the ballot that people marked, that not just the incremental amount, but the total
Right.
authorization.
I don't think we're going
Yeah.
to be allowed to do any of that.
Well, we'll see. It's all right. We've got the action item. Mina can take it and bring it back to us by next Monday. So I think that concludes our discussion for tonight. This was just an update, and next Monday we'll come back potentially with some decisions to make. Yeah.
Can I ask, when we're looking at the different scenarios, if we can also look at the impact to property taxes for each of these scenarios?
I think that would be prudent.
And just to clarify, for Mina, you asked if it would be exempt from Prop 2.5, and I believe that is the intention,
Yes,
right?
very much so.
Okay, so that's, yes, Mina, it would be exempt in the
Yeah, I was
question.
just
No, but I
understanding the
mean-
form of the question, but yes.
I just think that the town has already authorized that it be exempt from Prop 2.5, so a subsequent vote might be on a different
Well, it's a
Question.
debt exclusion, so
It's a debt exclusion.
so it's
Okay.
exempt.
All
I
right.
mean, it's,
Yeah.
All right, I think we're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
just-
until next time.
I just want to leave you with the thought that time is going to be money in this, and we really, really, really would appreciate the earlier a town meeting can be called, a special town meeting can be called, then we'll have some indication of what we need to do with this project.
You know,
But the
Doesn't that depend
60%
upon the
estimate
hearing?
and the finance committee meeting time, I think, are the key.
I think
Those
it's
are the
the
key
hearing,
things,
right?
but I just, if
Or-
And when are
I
they?
think we're going as fast as we can with that in
Right.
mind.
Can
And
I
actually, I
just-
see Peggy Briggs, the chair of the finance committee here.
Oh.
I don't know if you wanted to make a statement. I missed you, Peggy, in the back there.
Can I just ask, while Peggy's coming up,
I knew you were back there and I wondered if.
can I just ask while Peggy's coming up, what is that time frame? Is it October?
October 27th is the proposed date, but maybe Ms. Briggs
Okay.
will have something more.
Before, is that right?
That's what they had, the
October-
co-chairs had proposed.
October 27th is the proposed date for what?
So
The town
The
meeting?
finance committee hearing on the special town meeting, if such a special town meeting is to be held. But
But-
she may give us a better date, or maybe not.
Just to confirm, my notes show that the 60% design
was sent to the estimators on the 3rd. And that the design, we will get that estimate back on the 13th. Is that
2
still
weeks
correct?
typically. Yep,
Okay.
sounds right.
And the 90% estimate, this is all based on a July 21st meeting. The 90% estimate is December 19th to the estimators and getting it back on January 2nd.
Sounds right.
So
It
if
was-
that's still on schedule. And Matt, you asked me if we could schedule our hearing. It sounded like a week after the
After
estimate was
this-
received.
No, after the reconciled estimate
Comes to the
was
building committee
discussed
was
to the,
what-
by the
yes.
building committee.
Correct.
So it actually will have been in hand for 2 weeks by the time October 27th
Okay.
rolls around.
A 1 week felt a little quick, if I know it's a combination of, we need to schedule it, where the purpose of a hearing is to collect information, not to have it fully analyzed and not for us to have made a decision. But I think our members would want to have time to at least look at it.
Well, so one question I have is, in the past, we've seen these estimates only at the building committee meeting, and I wonder if they could be socialized before.
We would have to ask the professionals. They typically reconcile them in an all-day meeting, and then the estimators go back, they run their numbers again, and then come together with an agreed upon.
Yeah.
It takes a day or so after the reconciliation meeting. I don't know, because I'm not the professional in the room on this project, to know when that exact date is versus when our meeting is, but we
Yeah.
can certainly ask them.
Okay, you
and
can
find
see
out if
how
we
it
can
would
get-
make a difference if
I
we
don't-
could get them
Yeah, we
sooner.
don't want to
Yeah.
see it until it's reconciled. I mean, just
Yeah.
one.
Sure, but I think that
Sorry.
it could be reconciled and shared prior to the 20th,
Okay.
potentially. We don't know that
ask.
for a fact, but I think there's a real possibility.
The
it could.
which 20th?
October
October,
20th.
this like in a couple weeks. And you suggested that, yeah, like right around the corner, and that you suggested the hearing on the 27th, which is our regular meeting.
Yes.
So.
We
my-
hear that's usually the budget guidelines meeting, so it's not
And
like
we
you don't have
and
anything
we
to
have
do.
guidelines meetings
Yeah.
like interspersed. This is our busy time of year, but obviously the school building project is our top priority, well, among our top priorities. So I have not had an opportunity to discuss this. I have a meeting with the other leadership of the finance committee on Thursday morning. So we can discuss that and get back to you.
Okay,
Or
but-
Wednesday morning, sorry, Wednesday.
Wednesday morning would be better than Thursday, because we need to then get the town
Yeah.
clerk and the moderator
Yeah,
to
push the
line up
button. Yeah, I know.
around the dates. Yeah.
Okay,
I also have an offering that we can ask the professionals, and again, we'd have to go back and find out when they're getting it. We can always call a meeting other than that Thursday of our committee, if
Sure.
that was helpful. So as a suggestion.
Okay, Mary.
I have to make a comment. I feel uncomfortable with this rushing that we're doing. We're spending millions of dollars. And when we came before the town before, when we came into that town meeting and we had this approved, it was because it had been discussed and vetted at hearings and committee meetings, and memos were going back and forth between the finance committee and the select board and the building committee. And this was months and months of talking and negotiating. And we came into that meeting with an agreement. And that was because we had taken the time to carefully talk about it and understand what are the trade-offs, what is the impact to taxpayers, what are we asking the taxpayers to give up? Not just what are we asking them to pay, but what are we asking them to give up as far as other investments we could be making in the town for things like sustainability, transportation, open space, affordable housing. So these are all the things we should be talking about in an open session instead of rushing to get this done. So I'm uncomfortable with the pace of what we're doing here. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay. I mean, we're talking about dates at the end of
Yeah, but
October.
I feel like, well, can we get this? to
Well,
them
it's
first?
really to
Because
try to come up with a schedule to have those meetings, to have those discussions.
Yeah.
Well, it still feels we're trying to jam it. I'm
Okay.
just saying what,
And it's also worth noting, we were going to have our professionals here tonight to talk about those things, but we pushed them off till next Monday based on what Matt had
Yeah.
previously said.
so
So
I would like
they're
to
the
hear
ones
a
with the
robust, I would
answers.
like to have a robust conversation in the community about about the impact on our taxes or things that we've got to, the trade-offs we have to make before we have this special town meeting. That's where, I just want to make that public.
Related to that, a quick question. After the FinCom hearing, how many weeks do we need before we have this? So if you have it on October 27th, the special is what, 4 weeks after, 2 weeks after? Does anybody know?
My rough guess is it's the first week of December.
So there's a 5-week
I mean,
period.
I know there are folks that would like to have it in mid-November, but I think, like Mary was saying, I
Okay.
think it would be awfully rushed to
Okay.
do that.
Got it.
And if you're striving to have a representative attendance at the town meeting, beginning of December is not the ideal time.
Well, I don't know that that late November is either.
Well-
So anyway, I think these are all topics we can discuss next time.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as they say, if time is money, money is time. too.
Okay. All right, so now I'd like to have our next topic, which is the update on 2229 Main Street. So
Oh, by the way, it's wonderful to see so many people in this room at a meeting.
although it's getting hot in here, I tell
Yeah,
you.
it is. It is. It is
Yeah,
hot.
it's steamy. Okay,
See if I can fiddle with
boom.
fiddle
I'd like to
around.
recognize you to step up to the table, and also I don't,
It's not that bad. You open the window, somebody will, to open the window, somebody will
not.
jump out.
we're in a hurry to try
No,
to
it's
get
noisy.
schedules straightened out. That's the main thing.
Mike?
Pressuring her to
You
get the hearing so we can get the
No,
special
and it's
town
the
meeting.
schedule, to get the schedule
Bye.
date. Okay,
I didn't hear it like that.
okay, well, that was the,
I didn't hear it like that at all.
hello, Mr. Bohm.
Who turned up the heat?
Yeah, well, it's a hot topic, let's say that. All right, so this is a discussion about, well, I think you have a presentation to
Yes.
bring us up to speed as far as what's been happening with the 2229 Main Street project and opportunities we have to make further decisions about that property. Okay.
Thanks to the Select Board for getting us on the agenda here. I'm Paul Bohm, 11 Ridgewood Road. I am the co-chair of the NMI Starmet Reuse Planning Committee, which I believe is dormant, but still in existence. The demise of our committee has been exaggerated. My colleague here is, can introduce himself.
Gary Kleiman, 57 Central Street, also
Oh, that's a
co-chair.
great relief, by the way.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
way
Oh,
much
thank
better.
you.
Wow. I was about to call the fire department.
But they're
Okay.
here.
All right.
So what we'd like to do this evening is really re-engage the Select Board. We've had many conversations. It's been a while since we really spoke seriously about next steps. I'd like to recap sort of our discussions and what the committee has done. I'd like to focus on specific actions that we are proposing. This meeting, we will not be focusing on remediation or risk. We've had other discussions of that at length. That's not to say those issues are not important. They're related to everything we're talking about, but I squarely would like to talk on how do we move forward towards Select Board making decisions on acquisition, acquiring the site, and then how do we redevelop the site? We understand the process as a complicated one, but there are basically two tracks. There's a track of deciding how and when and if to acquire the site, and what we're going to do with the site, and they are interrelated. And so I want to kind of focus on those kind of two tracks. If I can go to the next slide, what I want to start to do is just remind the committee and others who are on the Zoom of the site, the opportunity of the site. So the StarMed site is sitting right in the middle of this diagram of the town line of Acton and Concord is towards the left, right at the river. You have the ice rink, you have the Acton Town Well there. Surrounding properties include Camp Thoreau, Black Birch, the whole Thoreau Hills area, Minuteman Arc, and you have Route 62 on one border. I put the Acton Town Well on this site because although I don't want to talk about remediation, there's a big part of the remediation to protect that well. So a lot of the groundwater issues are really to protect the Acton water supply. They have really nothing to do with use in Concord of the groundwater. We can get to that if you'd like to in terms of the Q&A. The next slide is an oblique of the site, which I always found to be a nice aerial shot because it really depicts that the site is it's a two-headed site. It's a site where half the site in the lower part of the site was never developed. It is a sphagnum bog, which is a very unique feature. There's, I think, one other in Concord, known as the Thoreau bog. It's a large bog, and none of that area was contaminated. There is contamination, burial up where the little black areas on the lower left. The cleared area, and there are no buildings left at the site. They've been completely raised. It's flat. Soil is being brought in, clean soil is being brought in, and dirty soil is starting to be removed. Surrounding the area, and I've just indicated, you have Thoreau Hills and Powder Mill Trail. There is a trail, town trail system on the left. Talk a little bit more about that. Forest Ridge Road is in the upper end of this, Main Street on the right. So I just want to impress upon you that there's a lot of woodland and a lot of area for conservation on the site. We'll get back to that in a moment. So next slide, please. Very briefly, just to recap the committee activities, we started our work in June 19th June of 2019 to focus on acquisition and redevelopment issues. There's a separate committee focusing on remediation. Pam Rockwell is here from the 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee. That committee has a technical mandate to really look at and monitor the remediation. Our committee's mandate was different. Basically, when that site is cleaned up, to what extent will be cleaned up and what can we do with it. We conducted public workshops as part of our committee activity, very successful workshops where we had maybe 150 people come to that, and lots of ideas and reuse and redevelopment. It was sort of a brainstorm, a community brainstorm. In the interim, the consent decree, that's important because this consent decree by the Department of Justice is the legal document binding all parties to clean up the site as it was proposed in the legal record of decision. And the town had a lot of input into that, how clean the site was going to be. And I think the town is very satisfied that that plan is really sound. We first briefed the select board in February of 2020. Our report, and you see the cover of the report on the right, which I have to thank Aaron Stevens for the graphics on that, was really very, very nicely done. The report was issued in April of 2021, and then we briefed the select board. We've had some conversations offline since then, but we really haven't had a serious conversation with recommendations and back and forth since that time. And it's been about a year and a half. Next slide, please. So in the report, a lot of questions have come up at various sub-meetings. There's a lot of information in that report. And I refer to you as a reference to the questions you may have. It doesn't answer all the questions, but it does deal with redevelopment options, a number of options. And it was very, I'd say it was very visionary in some sense. It sort of was a smorgasbord of types of opportunities. And we threw them out there so they could be evaluated. But there's no one plan in there. There is a master plan that I'll talk about in a moment. There's a chapter on risk discussions. We've had memos and discussions about risk, but there's a whole chapter in there on risk. Very importantly, there's a whole annex that was developed by two of the committee members on case studies, examples of other municipalities similar to ours, similar size, dealing with contaminated sites similar to the StarMed site, and how they were developed. And if you look at some of those case studies, and the 20 specific ones in there are contaminated sites that were developed for parks, for recreation, for housing, in some cases for schools. So those like some examples of towns very thoughtfully looking at opportunities of redevelopment of real estate for the benefit of the town and the public. And then importantly, there was two sections on liability minimization and acquisition path discussion. This was done by the committee. It didn't have a legal input to that at that point. I do know that as the town council has since been looking at some of these issues. We've done a lot of research on pathways that the town could acquire the site with minimal, if not any, liability for past contamination and an acquisition path forward. There are lots of issues in there and lots of decisions to be made, but there's a lot of information in the report on that topic. Next slide, please. This was the master plan. I think you probably saw a slide on this. I just put that out there to show that the committee looked at areas of the site that had been contaminated, areas that were never contaminated, and in generally what one could do within those areas. There's an area called A1, which the buildings that you saw that were demolished in that oblique diagram, that's what those buildings were. And so there could be buildings there, there could be no buildings there, there could be just playing fields, for example. It doesn't have to be buildings. There was a ring road conceived to provide access to whatever uses of the site. The whole area on the right was deemed to be preserved, and because of the natural bog area and the connectivity to the trails. I think that Powder Mill Trail system that I talked about before, an active and well-used trail system adjacent to Thoreau Hills, can connect easily to that whole bog area and represent additional recreation areas. And there are a lot of birds there. I inserted a viewing platform as an aspiration. It could be, it's sitting up at a height, and whether it's a deck or something more, people will use that with binoculars. There are also spaces reserved for possible transit linkages for bus stops. And then number 8 there, the areas A2, A3, and A4 on here could be developed for various purposes. The area A2 on the upper left is on a hill. It's a wooded area. It never saw any contamination. The areas on A3 and A4, soil is being removed. There's a lot of flat areas, so there's lots of different possibilities for the site. So I just put that out as a general master plan. So I'm going to move a little bit into recommendations at the next steps, because that's really what I want to leave the committee with. So this from the report, we had 3 basic recommendations. And these recommendations were made to move 2 important elements forward. The first element was decisions on acquiring the site. Second were decisions on how to reuse and redevelop the site for the benefit of the town and the citizens. And we realized then, and we realize now, this is a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because the select board must question, how can we decide on acquiring the site if we don't know how it's going to be used and redeveloped? How can we decide to acquire the site if the safety and liability questions remain unanswered? Those are 2 basic buckets of questions. So we'd like to propose some specific next steps, because I think we're collectively a little bit frozen in sort of how to move and when to move, and there's uncertainty. So we'd like to propose some specific concepts and steps where we can make simple progress forward, I think.
Do we have the right to acquire it?
You have the
Do we
town's
have the right?
approval to acquire it.
No, I mean, if we wanted it, would we be able to get it, or would it have to go, somebody else has to decide to sell it to us or transfer it to us?
So I may offer a number of opinions that sound legal, but I'm not a lawyer. The town has no, the site has no owner right now.
So what?
It has no owner. It's an orphan.
Well, it has an owner, but it's a defunct.
Has a defunct owner.
The town could take it. There are mechanisms by which the town could take it. If it won't take
By eminent domain.
That's one option.
It could take it by eminent domain for back taxes. There are liens to resolve on the
Right.
site.
But
Yes.
what I mean, and what I'm asking is, if we were to decide that we wanted to own it, would that be something that we could assume was possible?
Yeah,
Or,
there are 2 or 3 different legal pathways, I think, that the town could move forward.
So Gary and Henry, could you both move your mics closer to yourselves?
sure.
And Paul,
And,
Or turn it on.
Yeah, thanks, so that the audience
Folks can hear,
online
yeah.
can hear it.
We can get back to the
but I
question.
mean, there's a bankruptcy trustee and all that, right? And,
Yes.
and don't they have
Yes.
the obligation to maximize the yield from that property if they're going to?
So there's a couple of mechanisms in the report that go through, that are described as to how the town could take ownership.
And all of those would work if we wanted to exercise them.
They would. The party to sit down and discuss with.
So it is an actual option that we have.
It is the party, my understanding, the party to sit down, the first party is EPA.
Itself, which
attorneys.
is,
And they are
they're
very,
motivated.
they are very motivated. and very
Which?
The EPA.
U.S.
EPA.
Environmental Protection Agency. Not only could we take ownership, I think we would be well supported if we opted to take ownership.
I wouldn't say that EPA would roll out the carpet. They don't do that for anybody. But they're really willing to deal with these liability issues, to deal with a lot of the issues, because their objective is to have these sites reused and for municipalities to acquire these sites. That's their objective.
They want responsible owners to take over.
Yeah, so we should get to those next steps, I
Okay.
think.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
next slide.
Okay.
Those potential next
so-
steps. Oh, well, this, okay.
Well, the
You know, there's a
recommendations.
plan and then there's the recommendations.
Yeah. So
Well, no, the
let-
recommendations were the ones from the report. And then next there is this idea of a low-intensity plan.
Yeah,
And then finally, there's the next step.
those major recommendations are still out there, but I want to kind of break those down to maybe some bite-sized pieces a little bit. So where do we start? We were thinking, let's start phase 1 with I'll call it a low-intensity plan. What is that plan? It's a plan that we emphasize nature, sustainability, conservation, and surface uses only of the site. The site areas that can be developed will have 6 feet of clean soil over it. The previously contaminated areas, other areas, there's no contamination. So number 2, develop a passive recreation area afforded by new and connective trails, nature observation, that's that right side of the site. Develop active recreation, playing fields, covered pavilions, etc. These would be surface features. You might have to put a footing in the soil. But part of the stipulations on the site is there can be no digging below, I think, 6 or 10 feet. So that's within, so foundations might be a problem in any event. Number 4 would be access and parking. So then with this plan, we'd have to look at specific risks. I think evaluation of risks need to focus on, I call it development-specific risk assessment, because we can talk generally about possible risks, but let's start with a little plan. What are the risks in executing this plan? What are the risks in people using it as a trail? What are the risks in recreation playing fields that cover the surface? Notice in here, until the last bullet, we're not thinking of housing, we're not sinking any foundations. Let's put that into phase 2. In phase 1, let's have
can I ask you a question?
Yes.
About this?
Yeah.
So I think you're spot on about the chicken and egg comment that you made, that the select board is in this tricky position of recommending and deciding, do we go ahead or not, but we don't know how to answer all the risk questions, right? So that's a chicken and egg. So if we were to go ahead with this phase 1, which isn't as risky potentially as phase 2, wouldn't we have to have decided, though, we're going to acquire the site in order to do phase 1, right?
Well, this is the first step. I'm not saying that based on this, you can make a decision, but let's lower the threshold to anxiety and let's take a look at one aspect of the plan, which is passive and active recreation.
Right, but I
in the
guess
area.
I don't understand, in order to actually say, build a playing field, which let's say everybody's comfortable with that. But in order to do that, we have to acquire the site, right? So, but in order to acquire the site, we have questions about risk that might occur in phase 2 or 3 or whatever. That's the chicken and
Well, I
egg.
think that's really, I think phase 2, you cross that road when you come to it. That I don't think I'm suggesting is like phase 1 could just be it. You could do phase 1 and call it a day.
Right, I guess what I'm suggesting is that we decide before we acquire the site.
No, but I think that if you were then going to undertake phase 2, you would do that after conducting a separate risk assessment for that use.
But at
See what I
that
mean?
point, I might not want to be the owner of the site anymore. That's.
Well, I mean, I think that would have to be a decision of the town and the
Right,
select
right,
board.
right.
Right, so that would, yeah, I mean, the goal here is to say, if there's concerns about taking acquisition of the site, the easiest way to understand whether we can make a decision for that is to take down the intensity of the plan to those most basic elements. And then if we can't go for that, then clearly we're not going to go for anything. If we go for this, we may not need to go any further than this, but if later we decide, well, gosh, that's working great, everybody's happy, the risk we've dealt with by now, or we've studied them further, now maybe we could find other additional uses for the property, but that's a decision to be made by some other board, not by us.
We are not suggesting here that you can make a decision on acquiring the site based on phase 1. We're not saying that.
Yeah,
after
even
that-
phase 1.
You might, but that's just a way
But
to.
the opportunity
understand.
that's in front of us right now is to get a technical assistance grant that we could focus on this low-level use to see what would be the risk profile of that use. And if we can get clear on that from an external consultant, then we're in a better position to start to see, well, okay, does it make sense to acquire the site?
Once you, in order to do phase 1, you have to take ownership.
Right.
And once you take ownership, you assume much of the risk
Right.
merely by owning it.
Well, and that's what we got to understand. We got to understand what those risks are. And that's that. I think the thing that we're here for tonight, let's go to this next
slide.
slide.
Let me.
Next slide is that.
So I think we're talking about these first 2 bullets, right? The select board needs to define and fill the gaps in knowledge. You don't have all the knowledge that you need to increase your comfort levels before moving forward.
Right.
Okay, for example, the acquisition and development risks, you got to know all that. In parallel, I think you need to fully understand and explore how the site development could meet the current future needs of the town. Those are the needs. So our suggested actions, and we've talked about there is an opportunity to submit a grant for, Massachusetts has technical assistance grants up to $20,000. And we've discussed about applying for a grant to explore the risks and impacts of a specific low intensity, sort of a development specific risk assessment.
So-
Not a risk assessment for the site, that's already been done. Let's say we're gonna do these 4 or 5 things. What's the risk in doing those in the areas that, because that's so when we talk about a development specific risk assessment, that's the TAG grant, so.
But why would we limit it to the low intensity phase 1?
I think because at this stage, it seems clear that people aren't comfortable with going with a higher intensity use. And so the goal is, let's see if we can get any plan, basically any plan, and that's what this low intensity plan is, that the town would be willing to move forward on. If not, then there's no reason to have a
The
discussion.
way I look at it is, I'm not comfortable acquiring it until I really understand the risk.
But the risks are specific to a
Right. So
use.
as somebody who participates, I'm not that comfortable with somebody else owning that site. I want the town to own
Right,
it. As a
exactly.
resident of West Concord,
Right, so,
I'm not comfortable with somebody else owning it.
right, so we have to have that discussion.
There are ways we can control the use without owning it. We can zone it. We can zone it very restrictively, and
It's not, I was on the planning board for many years. It's not so much the zoning question as much as maintenance of the
Right,
institutional controls that
correct.
will be in place.
And
There's
that all
systems
has
that are
to-
being put in place
Right,
to keep the area safe.
Well, but we.
That's what we
can-
really
can
need to
use
discuss.
Zoning tools like we do for groundwater conservancy and that type of thing. We could have very restrictive zoning.
I have a correction.
But I agree with Gary. I think whether a private developer owns it or whether the town owns it, it's going to come down to the subcontractor that we hire to do the monitoring. Who is going to monitor this maintenance? And we have to really work through that. Are they in California and some siren might go off? That's not really going to do it for me. I really want on-site, monitoring, everything. We really need to work through all of that.
I know, so.
And just to finish up,
Okay, go ahead.
what I'm thinking is for this TAG grant, it ties in with, in your report, where you list other municipalities that have done Superfund sites. What are their best practices? How did they do it? Can we get a grant to have somebody look at all that and
That's what
see?
they're doing.
Right.
Well, but
not
also,
just
no,
list-
that's not the scope of that grant.
No, but
And I should say that the report already does include a study of those things.
there's a whole annex showing
Yeah.
best practices of how communities have.
And
okay.
projects, yeah, there's a whole survey of
All right.
projects of other
When we
towns.
talked earlier, I had thought that that's what this grant was going to
No,
do.
this grant is about studying the risks of this site for this low-intensity use.
Well,
So can I just ask a question? So this grant, I think, is trying to get people more comfortable.
Exactly.
Right.
A part of it is also communicating the
Yep.
risks to
Right.
people so that, public communication.
So that they
of-
use it and they go there and they see, okay, but what I'm worried about is, once you've done this, have you limited the use to these activities?
No, because
That's what I'm
that's
worried
why we're raising the question, the possibility of a phase two. But that assessment, I think, should be separated out from this
I
assessment.
want to let
Okay.
Paul speak, but I just want to point out, we're using the word risk so frequently, and we ought to be
I know.
talking about the word safety, because the point is, the site is being cleaned up to a residential standard, which means that a family could raise their children there for 70 years and not experience a higher level of exposure than, background level. I mean, it's
know.
being cleaned up to a very safe level for residential uses, let alone trails.
But the decision to whether we're going to take ownership of this is going to be made by the town, not by
Right.
this board, right?
Right.
So what you're hoping, I think, is to start letting people use the property or for passive recreation, so that they get a better feel for what it could be. Is
I
that,
just
am
want to
I?
continue the planning process.
Well, again,
Or
we're
do
not
we-
even at that stage, but I want to also recognize Ms. Escobedo, who has her hand up, and since she's remote, it's been difficult to participate. Go ahead. We're not hearing you.
Thank you very much. You've actually gone in and out of a couple of threads of the conversation that when I first put my hand up. And-
Uh-oh, sorry about that. I only just
No,
now
no, no,
saw.
that's all right. I applaud this approach to helping break it down into, a scope that all of us can begin to think about and handle, because previously it's just been too overwhelming. And I appreciate that the TAG grant has a specific, is for a specific reason, and you can only apply for certain use of that grant, I'm assuming. But the conversation that you started to go into and then left, a couple of you, had to do with identifying very clearly what are the maintenance, no matter who ends up taking over this property, what are the ongoing maintenance obligations, and what in fact is required, both in terms of expertise and just sort of the level of expense that we're thinking about in terms of both the maintenance and the monitoring. So for me, at least, and I would think for some other people as well, that whole area of some definition, more definition, that more people can understand, along with you trying to pursue this tag grant to identify the stated use that you've proposed, I think together are needed to go forward. And as I said, you
I
went
think
in.
that you've just queued up Mr. Boehm's next action item
Well,
suggestion,
I
or
have
two, or three.
three things to say in arrears. What, on the issue of what's the obligation to the town for maintenance, on Superfund sites, if you can have waivers of any past liability, which I'm sure you can get, then the responsibility of the town will be to make sure that the institutional controls, no digging here, no digging there, do this, don't do that, is done. Now, I was talking to Matt offline. This is like dig safe. You know, we have thousands of gas lines in town. There's a process that's in place that people don't burn down houses. This town would have to set up a process that makes sure that people don't do silly things at the site. That seems to be a fairly straightforward process. As far as monitoring the site, the EPA monitors the site continually. They put together 5-year plans after the cleanup. EPA does the monitoring of the site. We have to make sure we do not contaminate the site, that a gas truck spills on the site, then that's our responsibility. We have to make sure that we operate the site like any other town property.
That's what I want to explore
And
with the best practices. How do other municipalities do it? Because, for example, we had a contractor who was supposed to be monitoring broadband, and it crashed, and when everyone called, they weren't there. Well, we don't want to hire a monitoring contractor on this site who is AWOL at the.
And then there's the continuing functioning of the apparatus for cleaning up the discharge. You know, whose responsibility will that be going forward, and also monitoring that?
What discharge, Linda?
Well, there's the wells that are continuing to operate, right, that are pumping the,
That's EPA's obligation.
Yeah, it's EPA.
They will do that for the next 100 years, the operation of that system. Can I just make two other points very quickly?
You're saying for 100 years?
Whatever they need to do, it's 70 years has to be pumped and
Until
treated.
they decide to stop.
Until the monitoring says they don't need it. Okay, but that's the offside groundwater. The other, I want to.
But the other key point is that we probably, to solve the other issue that Linda brought up, we probably do need a standing body. So what we had done was we had disbanded this committee when they submitted their report. And that now, if we're hiring a consultant to look at risks, and we're also at the same time trying to understand some of these other open questions, we'd probably need a body that's doing that. And so that's the second near-term action item that is being, well, the
Let
third.
me just quickly go through the 3 bullets.
Yeah.
The TAG grant, as it's being drafted right now, to Terry's point, is not just focused, Matt, on the low intensity. It's that plus other development options. It's being, Chris Carmody is drafting it. We're working on it. You'll see it. It's not just to look at just the low intensity part of that.
Oh, excellent. Otherwise,
That's what it says in that first bullet. Secondly, the legal part of this has to continue. The pursuing, to answer Henry's question about, can we just acquire the site? What do we have to do? And my comment on minimization of liability and liens, that has to be pursued. That's lawyers do that. EPA would help us to do that. They said they would. The last point is you do need a body, whether it's recharging this committee, develop a new committee. Right now, we're sort of, I don't know, are we dormant? Are we alive? Are we dead? We're dormant. And so I think there's.
I actually think we disbanded the committee.
we did.
We did disband, it doesn't exist, but we could certainly bring it back. So that's fine. And we could probably also refresh the charge to reflect the tasks that remain.
In my last point, you're talking about a lot of things that are really important, but they're a little bit down the road, and you certainly have to confront those issues about maintenance on the site before you acquire it. I'm just saying, let's start the process here, so everybody starts getting more comfortable
Okay.
that we can do stuff.
So I'd like to recognize two other folks here. One is our town council, Mina Makarios, who's in attendance, and I didn't know if you would like to make any remarks at this stage. And then Pam Rockwell. Mina?
Sure, Matt, I'll be brief because I know you have a full agenda and this committee has said a lot. Just by way of recap, the last time, a couple of months back now, that the committee had talked about these issues, and the select board had actually asked us to start thinking about what could we get from EPA in terms of agreements to protect liability. I think the questions here are all the right ones. Just to very briefly touch on a few that were asked, the way to acquire the site would be through either a regular eminent domain proceeding or a tax title taking. However, as we've recommended in the past, this is not your typical tax title for obvious reasons, given the history of the site. So what you would do, and this is what other towns have done when transferring contaminated properties so that they could take care of the institutional controls, is to have negotiations up front with either the current owner, that's not possible here because the owner's gone, or the environmental agencies. And so we had already thought about some of the things you would want from EPA, liability protections, as someone mentioned, for any past liability, a clear understanding of where institutional controls, and that term keeps coming up a lot, but it's essentially, to Henry's point, it's sort of internal zoning to the site. It's making sure which parts can and can't be touched in the future and in what way, what ongoing monitoring, et cetera, needs to be done. Typically, that when we say ongoing monitoring, we're talking every quarter at the most, maybe 6 months, year, couple of years, you know, so that kind of issue.
Right.
So all of those are kind of within the normal scope of things that EPA would expect us to want to talk about if the town were to go forward. You know, from my perspective, understanding this site from the sense of, even if you were not going to construct anything on it, what would be the possible liability for the town, and what would be the required obligations of the town, is a very good way to start. I do think, you know, there may be folks who will then want to know that next phase, what else could we do with the property? But at a minimum, you want to know on day one, if you were taking this project for, you know, let's say just conservation land forever, or open space, I should say, forever, what would that look like? And then just last thing I'll say, just because to maybe give some context, some of these same concerns, albeit with a non-defunct owner involved, were addressed by the town with respect to the Grace site. The Grace site, which now has solar panels and some of the bus parking facilities, has ongoing monitoring that Grace has to access. It has ongoing obligations of areas that can and can't be touched. It has, you know, deeper down contaminated soil and groundwater at low levels post cleanup. So this is not certainly new to towns in general, but it's also not new to Concord in that sense.
Okay, thanks.
I'm not sure I heard him correctly, but the reference to the Grace property, which is property we did take by eminent domain, we then were not able to get any representations or with regard to conditions on the property because it was not a negotiated sale.
Henry, correct. The difference, I was referring to Grace in terms of the ongoing maintenance and monitoring obligations, which they have continued. The difference between here and Grace is, in Grace's case, there was someone to negotiate with, but they weren't willing to negotiate. Here, EPA is essentially doing all the work and is acting on behalf of the two private PRPs that do exist, that have signed the consent decree, and the defunct PRP. So an eminent domain taking, while you wouldn't be able to get releases from the defunct entity, you would get a covenant not, you would ask for, you would try and negotiate a covenant not to sue with EPA and DEP. And that's a well honed mechanism that both use for exactly this reason. When an entity is willing to step into an issue that it hasn't been involved with in the past in order to maintain institutional controls because the property is meaningful to it for other reasons, typically because it's a town or community that it's in.
Yeah. Pam?
Is this on?
Yeah, if you put the green light and then just introduce
Pam
yourself.
Rockwell, 1810 Main Street, and chairman of the 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee. So my committee hasn't done much this year. We've done a risk letter for you, and we've been overseeing some work at the remediation planning. And what has become very clear over the past year or so is there isn't a lot of technical work that's happening anymore at the site. There are occasional little bits. There is an environmental agency advocacy group that actually pays a consultant to look over that information, and we see that information too, and we participate in community groups. But honestly, we're getting old, we're engineers, we're very specifically looking at the technical details of the site, and our committee charge actually has a much broader charge than that. It's anything at the site. So in fact, you might just want to put the right people on this committee to take it into the next decade to be looking at.
Able to look at those things.
So I wanted to point out that we wrote our risk letter. The biggest thing about the risk letter that you received is that this is a great property and we don't want to miss it. And being on this site and using the site actually makes it more likely that somebody isn't going to dig in the wrong place and mess something up. We actually have a model that wasn't included in the risk thing, but in the past, in the 90s, we actually did oversee monitoring at the site. We had a special permit for building E and later a special permit for the holding basin removal. And in the same model that EPA would pay for the monitoring at this site in perpetuity, and that we would simply maybe get those reports and have the opportunity as an owner to see them. This was the same thing where air monitoring reports and water monitoring reports went to the building commissioner, that was John Minty at the time. He would send them off to the Board of Health, and they would review them quarterly or semi-annually, depending on when those happened. And if there was something they had an issue with, John would take it back to the person who was doing the monitoring and discuss it. So yes, there is an advantage to having someone in the town sort of be responsible, that is a staff person, that is your point person. Right now, that's Chris Carmody, right? Chris is going to be overseeing the grant, writing the grant.
Chris Carmody, yeah.
Carmody is right. But having someone in the town that in fact is your point person for that, honestly, whether we're the owner or not, but when we're the owner, we've got a lot of better position to actually make sure the monitoring gets done and that somebody is prodded, and that if somebody digs up something that they're not supposed to, it gets fixed quickly. Because, you know, places like the other parts of the Gray site and other things that are nearby, we don't have that control over. And this is very similar to the Gray site in that functionally we could be responsible for anything at the Gray site. They are the same way we're responsible here if we damage something, but we don't because we know what we're doing.
Okay.
So the other thing that I wanted to mention is that when we worked on the reuse plan, we actually put in the idea of staging, of phasing the use of the site, because a big part of what this TAG grant is really going to be is not so much the looking at the risk, but also making sure people understand the risk, because that's what the discomfort is right now.
Right.
You know, I have a sense of the risk, and I am very comfortable with the idea of using this site and living there and being responsible for making sure that nobody digs anything there. You know, we were responsible for the fact that nobody dug anything into the parking lot next to the high school where there was a landfill for years and years. We have lots of places where we have these kinds of restrictions. This is not, the big work at this site has been done, and what's going to be left is going to be deep underground and is going to concern the long-term water use at the site, and not the I'm getting contaminated at this site because there's something miserable here. That stuff has all been packed up and taken away. So this is a really good opportunity for us to think about that and get involved, get it. And as a member of CREW, the Citizens Research and Environmental Watch, which is the group that for years worked on this site before it was a Superfund site and continues to have a tag grant that gets renewed every few years. They get $50,000 every few years. They pay a consultant. I'm going to say we want to get this tag grant. We want to be pursuing these options. We want to get started. We want to be writing it broad enough that we can get it renewed every year for a while. And every time we think about redevelopment, they can give us a few more dollars to help the people in our town who need to do that work, MENA, planners, and whatever. The 2229 committee, we are very, very focused people on this, and we do not have a good sense of what the town is like. We need people like Gary, who served on 2 or 3 different committees, and Paul, that have this broad reach in town, to be joining our committee and to be sort of moving it into the next decade. Because the next decade of what this committee needs to do is going to be thinking about how to reach out to people and let them know what's going on and make sure that town needs are thought about when we think about this area. Like playing fields are such a big deal right now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that I think this idea that right now the 2229 committee has 7 members, 1 from natural resources and 1 from health, and those people can serve at the same time on our committee, and that is actually a really good key to more of our members should be serving on multiple committees, as opposed to just having people who are individuals who are focused just on the 2229 space. And that right now we're being staffed by the health department because we were only thinking about health, and maybe planning or one of the other departments would be a better department to be reporting to.
Okay, thanks, Pam. And I would,
One last thing. On the committees, I think we need to think of something new that's appropriate.
right, well, I know that last time with NMI StarMet, we had Pam serve on NMI StarMet doing 2 committee, and that's another model. So I think we don't have to decide the model tonight. I think we can have some offline conversations and bring it back to the select board.
Last thing, we do have to make some progress, and if we get the grant's not a sure thing. If we don't
Right.
get the grant, we have to figure out some way to do that. We have
That's
to,
right.
Is there a deadline? Is there a deadline?
October 18th.
Yeah,
And how
but
much-
the grant
how much
we're
is it?
going to apply for
How much
anyway.
is-
It's not
How
a
much are you asking for?
It's
20,000.
20,000?
Yeah, but it's enough, believe it or not.
For-
I asked the same question when I first
For
heard
low
that.
density and other development options?
Well, that's why I suggested maybe just focus on low density,
Yeah.
but Paul believes that it's enough to look at the
No,
multiple
I want to
options.
see it broader.
I'm not going to apply for this grant. I'm an environmental consultant.
Right.
There's a ton of information that's available. Nobody has to collect new data. This can be done for that price.
Okay.
It's really just synthesizing the data that's already been collected and presenting sort of a Superfund
Yeah,
Development
that's right.
101 for
That's right.
a
Okay.
couple of key committees.
Also, I'd really be in favor of us drafting a charge for a new committee. It could be, maybe we combine the 2 groups or whatever, but
There are a couple of
I think it's
options
worth,
in the
what we need to
report.
do, and again, I was suggesting an offline process, is
Right.
review the 2229 main charge, because I think as Pam says, it's
Yep.
actually pretty broad. So,
Right.
but then also, yeah, look at alternative models.
You
So,
might want a task force instead of a standing committee.
and that would give us more sort of a deadline to pursue
Yeah,
some
the
things.
good news is you have willing people to help.
Yeah,
That's
Right.
great.
that's
news.
good. Okay, and then meanwhile, Mina, you'll be continuing to focus on item number 2, which is the legal side of this. So,
Yes, and that's obviously tied together. The getting that grant gives you a really good way to synthesize all of the different technical risk, which drives what are your potential exposure, what your potential
Okay.
exposures for liability. But we've looked at that a lot, so that's not heavy lifting on our end either. And happy to keep working with these folks on it.
okay, great. Well, thanks for coming in. I think we've got a path, at least for the next step. And we have many more steps to walk after that. Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. And now, gentlemen, please step forward. We'll speak with our fire department. We get the update. Thanks for your patience tonight. These last 2 topics both consume more time than we had budgeted.
We're over budget.
We're over budget.
Spend a whole meeting on each one of those topics.
Well, we will spend multiple, I'm pretty sure, in the future. And then there's another mic here that could be pulled over. Oh, there we go. There you go. Yeah, excellent. Okay.
Good evening.
Here we are. I don't know if those are really loud units, those ACs, but I can do it.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thanks for inviting us.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Tom Judge, I'm the fire chief. I think most of you know Walter Latta. Walter is the assistant fire chief.
Okay.
And we also have Captain Brian Whitney with us. Brian is one of our shift commanders. And Brian is also our training officer. So, we're going to talk a little bit about our staff and where we are and a little bit about training. So I thought it would be great to have Brian here for that. So I know this is a new format. The police have met with you, and I believe DPW.
That's right.
So,
And they've both been really valuable updates.
I think it's a great idea. I just kind of don't know where to start because it's such a new format. So I'm just going to give you an overview of the department.
Yeah.
Most of the others have just given us
Yeah.
the kitchen sink.
Just let you know
yeah.
where we are. I'll start with the piece that we
Looks
couldn't.
like you have a very well-organized
This is,
outline there.
so I didn't go to law school, Henry, but if I had, it would definitely look like this.
Well, it's a
I've got-
diagonal up.
I've got arrows and numbers and all kinds of stuff. So the people, that's, we pretty much can't do anything without them. We have 49 of them. We have 49 employees in the fire department. We have 2 admin staff. I think the fire stations might be watching, so I shouldn't say this, but arguably the most important, the admin staff, because I would be really lost without them.
Yeah.
So I'm probably in trouble for saying that, but 45 uniformed members who are members of the bargaining unit and work on the shifts, and Walter and myself, 2 chief officers. The shifts are broken down in, I'm sorry, of those 45, one of them is a fire prevention inspector who is Lieutenant Dave Nichols. So he's in the bargaining unit, but he works straight days, doing fire prevention inspections and permitting and all kinds of stuff. The groups are broken down into it's four work groups, and they are made up of one captain who's the shift commander. In a lot of parts of the country, not the Northeast, but that title would be known as a battalion chief. So that's kind of their peer equivalent throughout the country.
Fighting fires, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And under the shift commander is a lieutenant and 4 firefighters at headquarters. And in West Concord, we have also a lieutenant and 4 firefighters. So if we were fully staffed every shift, we would have 11 people on duty. Probably about 82 to 84% of the time, we are not running fully staffed. We will drop down 1. So we would be running with 10 people on duty. So for example, if we had 2 people on vacation, we would cover one of them with overtime and the other one would go uncovered. And that's largely an overtime conservation effort.
And this is 24/7.
24/7. Yep, 24/7. And 24/7 with those kind of numbers, you can imagine it necessitates from time to time people working when they don't want to.
I could think so, yeah.
Captain Whitney could speak to that because he's on that end. The shift commanders are responsible for filling the shifts, and occasionally he gets to deliver the bad news that somebody's being ordered to work, which is, it's an obligation that everybody understands when they take the job. Yeah. So it's part of it.
So basically, at any time of the day or night, there are 10 firefighters waiting,
yes,
essentially to intervene.
Yep.
Okay.
So with those 10, we're staffing 1 command vehicle on the shift. 1 command vehicle, that's the shift commander. You see the pickup truck going around with the cap on it. That's the shift commander. The command vehicle is set up with a command, a pull-out command center, so that they can safely operate an incident and maintain accountability of everybody who's working on a scene. It's somewhat organized chaos. It looks kind of crazy, but it really is helping. It's really helping him keep a good handle on what's going on. A recent example of when that was really important is Captain Whitney happened to be the shift commander the night that we had the 6-alarm fire on Sudbury Road. And, A, his skill, but B, the tools he had to work with gave him the ability to really maintain tight control on a lot of people and a lot of apparatus.
Including other departments.
Yeah, especially other departments,
Which
because,
is pretty interesting.
Yeah, because you don't know.
Correspond them.
Yeah, you know who you're getting, but you don't always know how many you're getting. And you have to keep track of not only the company from out of town, but how many people are on it. In case something happens, and now you have to account for people and track them down. So shift commander is in a vehicle, and then at headquarters we have an engine company, which if we're running at full strength, we're running with 3 people on it, a lieutenant and 2 firefighters. If we are running, we call it running short. If we're dropping down to 10, then it's a lieutenant and 1 firefighter. The ladder company and the ambulance at headquarters are cross-staffed. So there are 2 firefighters that are assigned to each, to both, and they will basically they will take the vehicle that's appropriate for the call. For medical emergency, obviously they're taking the ambulance. For any type of a fire call, they would be taking the ladder truck. At the moment, they're taking engine 5 because our ladder truck is out of service, getting some repairs done. It'll be back in a couple of days. We have a very strong mutual aid system, so we make up for that loss with backfill from another community immediately. West Concord, we have an engine company that always has 3 on it, a lieutenant and 2 firefighters. And the West Concord ambulance A3 always has 2 firefighters on it. So that's the organizational structure of the department. Really kind of the operations piece of it. And then in fire prevention, Assistant Chief Latta manages fire prevention along with Lieutenant Nichols. And I guess Walter, why don't you just talk a little bit about what that looks like and what you guys are doing.
Yes, thank you for having us. So we average about 900 inspections a year. So we inspect anything from commercial to residential. Obviously, Concord has a lot of growth going on right now. And so myself and Lieutenant Nichols are responsible for having that communication with the general contractors, working with the town planners to make sure everything is safe and meets code. So that's the things that we do. Not only do we do the inspections, but we also attend seminars and conferences to stay up with the latest codes and things of that matter. So as you know, solar panels and energy storage systems are a thing that are happening right now. So that's our big concentration. We just had a outside vendor come in to talk about the safety aspects of energy storage systems. So we deal with a lot of that stuff that's going on in Concord, but we also assist our neighbors, and we talk to them what might be going on or what they're seeing in their towns. You saw down in Mansfield, I do believe, hydrogen become a thing, a fueling station. So we're always trying to network, but we're also trying to make that point of contact with fire prevention. So the general contractors and the town planners, they come to us and we assist them in getting their permits and get them to where they need to be code compliant.
I mean, we have a hydrogen production facility.
That's correct.
In town.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Plug power, right?
So, and that's what makes Concord such a special town to work for. We have 2 prisons as well. We have a hospital. We have the national park. So we are protecting a lot of things in this community that a lot of places around us do not have. So it's a special thing to be here.
I had another fire chief ask me recently, why are you on the news so much? And honestly, I myself and Chief O'Connor, we're on the news a lot more than our peers. And it's not because channels 4, 5, and 7 have some, special place in their hearts for us. It's because we have this, we're kind of at the crossroads of, of Central Mass and Boston. We're 12 miles from Cambridge, or 14 miles from Cambridge. We do have this really robust infrastructure that creates a lot of interesting calls for us.
And sometimes interesting in a bad way, but yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, they are. I mean, a lot of them are, but that's, that's what we were hired to deal with. And we, unfortunately, at times we get to see quite a bit of it. So for a small community with, with a relatively, well, geographically a large community with a small size population, we are doing the things that much larger communities get involved in fairly often. We're very busy. I was looking at a report this morning from the shift commander on Saturday, and the thing that jumped right out at me was that in the 24-hour period on Saturday, they did 22 calls. And that is not unusual for us now. When I first started, you might, if you had 3 or 4 calls, you had a really busy day.
Wow. Because I think that the outright fires, thanks to improved fire codes, better materials, inspections, those are actually down relative to historical periods. It's the other kinds of calls, right? The ambulance types of calls that are up.
Our medical calls and service calls are way up. Fires remain, the numbers remain pretty consistent, but I think what has gone down is the level of damage.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to like the 1930s.
Oh, sure.
They used to be much higher.
Yeah, pre-sprinkler systems.
There are a lot of things that have improved over the years.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, every one of those things that has improved, it's been the result of a code change, and a code change always follows a tragedy somewhere. So, but those things have improved.
So are there things that the public could do to, or that you would suggest that we could do as a town to maybe reduce the burden of, I don't know, unnecessary service calls, or I don't know, are there procedural changes in terms of how we fulfill service calls or ambulance calls, or I don't know. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be, on the receiving end of these calls for our family once or twice. And I was always impressed, first of all, how quickly the response came. But then secondly, I was amazed by just the number of people and vehicles and everything that showed up. And I mean, you have a medical incident with one person, but you literally have like 8 to 10 people there. And it always struck me as like, wow, do we always do that? Do we need that many people? What's going on? A ladder truck,
And we get that question a lot, and questions like that. I called for an ambulance. How come an ambulance and a fire truck and a police car showed up? Well, the ambulance and the fire truck go to every medical because this is anecdotal, but everybody's on the second floor, and we have to carry them down. So, if we sent 2 people to a medical emergency, that would mean that 2 people were having to manage the medical emergency, and then they would have to be the people that were also moving the patient onto the whatever device we're using to get them down the stairs. And then it would be 2 people on their own to do that lift and carry and down the stairs or up the stairs or whatever the case might be. So honestly, that's, having those people there, it would generally be 5 people from the Concord Fire Department at a medical. And they're there for everybody's safety. They're there for the firefighter safety. They're there for the patient's safety. And one thing that we don't experience an awful lot of is that is, pretty common in EMS, is we don't experience a lot of back injuries. We experience some, but we don't have a huge problem with it. And one of the things that I attribute that to is the number of people that we're able to send to a call. And and not everybody has that same benefit. Other communities that are smaller, they are sending 2 people to a call and having to manage all of that. I worked in before I got on the department here in 1985, I worked part-time in a neighboring community where there were two people on duty, and the two people were it. So
Wow.
if you were on the third floor, the both of us were carrying you down.
Wow.
So I have a related question, and I agree with Matt. Every time we've needed service at our house, it's been so professional and it's just so incredibly well done. A lot of response. But I'm wondering on your comment about, how we have Route 2 and we have a hospital and we have a prison, we have a hydrogen facility, we have all this stuff, and we only have 18,000 people to pay for it. Whereas like a big city that has all that has a lot of people to pay for it. I'm wondering if you have any kind of system for charging back if there's a collision on Route 2 and there's medical emergencies. Do our taxpayers pay for that? Or are you able to charge back to insurance companies? And the same with the prison, like does the state help, or do taxpayers foot the bill for all of these things?
So we do charge for medical emergencies where we transport. So every ambulance trip, there is an ambulance bill associated with it. Other service calls we don't charge for. We don't charge if we respond to a fire. We don't charge. Those are things that I don't even know that there is currently a legal mechanism for us to charge.
What about the ambulance? If you do charge, do they actually pay, or is it kind of a 50-50?
No. I don't know the exact number, but we actually have a very good we have a good rate of collection.
Just turn into this meeting.
Is it because they're paid by insurance in most cases?
Yeah, in most cases they are insurance. There's actually very few private payers.
Good.
And I think, by and large the people that we're dealing with are all insured. And I mean, even the prison, we go there, that's, there is insurance. I'm sure the state is self-insured, but there's insurance that pays for that trip.
Great.
Thanks. I don't know if you're through with your presentation, but I was curious about the major initiatives that you have going on in the fire department today. I mean, you were talking about training. I don't know what other kinds of initiatives you may.
So, over the past several years, we did have some major initiatives. We brought A3 online, the West Concord ambulance.
Yeah.
And that was done in a couple of phases. We brought that in. That started with Chief Cotreau. We brought that in starting at Monday through, it was 7 days a week, but it was 12 hours a day. So we started that with 4 new employees. And then a couple of years ago, we were able to add the additional 4 employees to make it a 24-hour service up there. Following that, we were able to, from within our existing shift strength, we didn't add people, but we were able to restructure a bit, and we created 4 additional lieutenant positions, which gave an additional supervisor, the one at headquarters now, because the captain, everything I described that the captain was doing, prior to those 4 lieutenants, the captain was also very hands-on with, supervision, direct supervision, in the station on all things, rather than having a more global perspective of what was going on with the group. So now the level of supervision in both stations is essentially the same. So those are two major initiatives that we had involving personnel. We've had a lot of initiatives with training, and some of it is because of the changing world. Captain Whitney's going to talk about this a little bit. We've gone through a lot of training and a lot of prep work and a full-scale exercise on rescue task force and active shooter type training. But we have to focus right now on training an awful lot, because we have, and I was shocked when I looked at this number today. I've been chief since December of 2017. I've hired 20 people. out of a 45-person bargaining unit. So we have a very...
It's a lot different from the way it used to be.
It's very different.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing now is that we have 20 new people, and a lot of those 20 have been in the past couple of years. And, you know, we have a lot of people that are great, and they are going to become very seasoned, excellent firefighters. And at the moment, they're just learning. They're all, you know, they've all been through the academy, or they're scheduled to go to the academy, but there's nothing other than experience that can really, teach them. So,
And why do you think?
Because of retirement or because people move on to other positions?
So this is primarily retirements, and we had a couple of career changers, and we've had 5 people. I was looking at this today because I kind of had a feeling you might ask. We had 5 people in the past 4 years, Brian.
It might be 5 years.
So 5 people within the past 4 to 5 years that left to go to other departments, and
Town?
No. I'm sorry, other fire departments.
Oh, other fire departments.
And when that happens, we're obviously interested why.
Right.
Yeah.
So well, in one case, it was because the person who left went to a community not far from here that does not run an ambulance, and this individual. They don't run an ambulance service. So this individual, great person, really good firefighter, did not care for EMS so much.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, that for him was a better fit. We lost 2 people at the same time to Cambridge. Cambridge is a department that is probably one of the most attractive in the state to somebody at the early stages of their career. And it is, they probably end up with more firefighters from other departments than anywhere. They're hard to compete with. They offer a lot for somebody who's looking to see more action. And there are some things that we just can't compete with. Interestingly, one of the 2 that went to Cambridge, before he left, he had just become a paramedic, and he came to me and he asked me if I thought there was any chance that in the next 2 to 3 years, do you think there's any chance, Chief, that we might be going to that level of service? Because if we are, I'm going to stay. And I said, I don't think I can give you any commitment like that. I don't know the answer. But I can't say, I don't want you to stay on some false promise. So, so that's something we can't really compete with.
You rely on Emerson Hospital for paramedics?
It's actually not Emerson Hospital, even though I think it might still say it on the side of the truck.
Yeah, I was thinking that I've seen the vehicles that say that.
It's Pro EMS from Cambridge. When Emerson Hospital's ALS program folded, the region was suddenly crippled for paramedic service, and I was not the chief at the time. Mark Coutreau was involved in this, but I think 8 or 9 communities formed this organization called CMERA, which is the Central Middlesex Emergency Response Agency. And they very quickly they had about 6 months to get it done. They very quickly needed to figure out what the region was going to do about ALS, and essentially ended up determining they needed to hire a contractor. So Pro EMS is the contracted ALS provider for the CMERA region. Okay. They do have a relationship with Emerson Hospital, and I believe they still carry the name on the side of the truck.
Okay.
So another one left to go to the Nashua Fire Department for the same reason as Cambridge. He wanted to see some more action.
Bigger time operation.
Yeah, well, and I guess I don't feel bad about that, because I look at the reasons that they're leaving, and I'm okay with those reasons.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not money or benefits generally.
No, I mean, I have not heard that.
And we don't want to create more burning down buildings to give people more action necessarily, so.
Well, I kind of jokingly said this today. This is something that we can't compete with because on the other end of it, we're trying to reduce those opportunities.
Yes, exactly.
So,
Exactly.
Like a dentist and fluoride.
yeah, exactly. So if you're interested, I just thought I might go over a list of things that we
Sure.
do, because I know everybody knows that we provide ambulance service. I know that everybody knows that we provide firefighting services, but there are a host of other things that we're involved in that may not be well known. Most of them are the product of regional efforts. So just if you'll indulge me.
Sure.
So EMS and firefighting within the department, we're always training at the correct times of year for water rescue and the different things we could get involved with there. Ice rescue, two very different skills, usually on the same geographical area, but two very different skills with a completely different set of equipment requirements and training requirements. Regionally, we have folks that are involved in dive rescue, technical rescue, hazardous materials response, fire investigation, and our region, which is Fire District 14. All of those things come in under that umbrella of Fire District 14. We also have a communications unit which will respond to any call that we want on demand. And what that does is it has the capability to patch radios together, but they also have a cache of portable radios that they can distribute, and it's just the entire organization of it is a huge benefit to us in the town, and we're actively involved in all of those disciplines. And it's
So we don't necessarily have scuba staff, but we are part of a district that does, and
we have two members on the team
that are trained to do it.
We have two members that are divers on the District 14 team. If we had an incident right now, we could have 40 divers here probably within an hour. Now, we would not need 40 divers,
right?
But the team is comprised of 40 divers, and we would have what we needed in very short order.
Okay.
And the same with those other disciplines: technical rescue, hazardous materials.
What is a technical rescue?
So if we had an incident a couple of years ago where somebody was trapped in a confined space at a local facility, and they were badly injured and trapped in a confined space. Well, it's a technical rescue team would be the type of team that would go in and get that person out. Another example is today I saw a notification for Chelmsford had a building that was collapsing, and it was very unstable. And that's the sort of thing that if we had that, we could call for a technical rescue team, and they would have the ability to shore it up and make it safe.
Okay.
So that sort of thing. And these folks are they're very passionate about those sub-disciplines. They love what they do, and they're all good at it.
Sounds like one of the more interesting parts of the job. And dangerous.
Yeah, it is, but that's why they train, and they really work hard at it. So this would probably be a good time, since we talked about all that stuff, Brian, talk about some of the bigger training initiatives we have. And if you would, I didn't think of this earlier, on the active shooter, just talk about how we went about procuring all of the ballistic equipment.
Sure. Good evening, and thanks for having us. Real quick, just to highlight some of the training, as we talked about the structure of the department earlier. We're not going on runs every moment of the day, but you probably hear the sirens regularly enough. Last year we did around 3,600 runs. We're on track to do pretty close to 4,000 runs this year. So there's quite a few runs we do. About half of those are medical related or car accident related. The other half, any variety of fires, hazardous condition calls, fire alarm calls or just a bunch of miscellaneous special service type calls. So we train for any of those variety of things, including what the chief had just mentioned. So every shift, every company's trying to get training in just about every shift. Some of those shifts, as the chief alluded to, 20 odd runs, you may not be able to fit training in because you're too busy running all day, but the slower days, if we're not on runs, we're trying to get some training in. And we base our training on national standards that we're meeting some type of competency level, whether it be OSHA, NFPA, which is National Fire Protection Association, or ISO standards, which helps towards the insurance rating for the ISO. So we have some goals that we try to align some of the training to try to help us meet those standards. And then aside of the daily shift training that is left generally up within those parameters, left up to the lieutenants and the shift commanders to see what targeted training might be best for their group. Again, a lot of newer firefighters, so every group has some slightly different training needs within our general core competencies. We have tried to schedule 1 or 2 major trainings every year. And as Chief just mentioned, the last couple of things we did the last year. One was through a grant that the town received. We were able to replace all of our breathing apparatus. And by doing that, the department went with a different brand, and we'd used the same brand for well over 30 plus years. And as little as it seems to go from one brand to another, there are little intricacies with that. And to learn the makeup of the new SCBA or the breathing apparatus, to be able to work with it in a smoke environment, a heated environment, et cetera, we had extensive training. We brought in an outside vendor to work with us on some training skills and just get everybody through the paces and get used to the new equipment. As the chief mentioned, with the environment we're in today, one of the big pushes that it took us several years to get fully up and running, but we finally got a full training program and a complement of protective equipment for active shooter and active threat type of events. And we were lucky enough to get a donation from a person that wanted to help out the department and was able to fund the full, pretty much the full protective equipment setup for the department. So essentially right now, everybody on duty has, every firefighter on duty has a ballistic vest, bulletproof vest, bulletproof helmet, and then we have a handful of first aid kits that we've taken from the active shooter needs, combined with a more broad-based mass casualty need, meaning any type of medical incident where you had a lot of injuries and just need to be able to treat many injuries rapidly at the same time. We kind of were able to merge those two together to make this a more flexible use of it. And then over the last couple of years have conducted training on all the groups, starting internally and through the assistant chief in Sudbury, who spearheaded a regional grant for 4 towns, Sudbury, Wayland, Lincoln, and us. All 4 towns put together training for all our police and fire departments to get a practical session. And so we went from some theory and classroom training to getting the protective equipment in place and training on the equipment. As you'd suspect, most of us, when we joined the fire department, weren't planning on researching and training on ballistic equipment, but unfortunately that's what we have to now. We got used to that. Then we trained on the process of what a rescue task force would be, working with the police. And we concluded, was it May, April and May, I think we sent the 4 towns, they all got together 4 different days over in Sudbury. Herb Chambers building that he had that was vacant at the time, he was nice enough to let us use. And that was a great opportunity for the 4 towns to work together with the different fire departments, and then all of the fire departments to work with the police, which is a very rare opportunity for police and fire to really train together, and then police and fire from different towns training with each other. So that's probably one of the biggest training initiatives we've done recently. And there's always something like that we're looking for down the road. We look at the department, we look at the needs of the department. For example, right now, it's a very young department. Probably close to half the department has less than 5 years with us. That doesn't mean they don't have some experience outside of here, but a relatively newer group of employees. So we're targeting some of our training to more the core training aspects. In the past, we've brought in vendors that bring us up to speed on new advanced auto extrication techniques, the car construction changes. There's electrical vehicles now, different techniques to better access patients if they were trapped in a car. Water and ice rescue, we bring someone in to do water and ice rescue training for the whole department. So Training is an extensive part of the daily activity. If we're not busy out on a busy day with runs, we're one of our priorities of our daily routine, amongst other things, but one of the priorities is training. And just jumping back to the question that came up earlier too, you'll see us out in the fire truck and bringing it to a medical, bring it to the other calls. Just another add-on as to why we do that is that flexibility and the ability to be able to be out doing one thing, and if we get another call, with 4,000 runs a year, we have many simultaneous calls. So we may be at a medical or at a training incident or training evolution with the fire truck, that it doesn't seem like we need the fire truck for that particular thing, but it keeps us in ready to respond to another call. So we can go from call to call. If we get to a medical, we get to another type of call where we don't need the help at that one, but another one comes in, we always have our toolbox with us. You know, it's like equating a plumber or an electrician going to do a simple, service call with a light switch, for example, but he always brings his tool van with him because he's going to go from one service call to another. That's what you'll get from us by bringing our tools with us everywhere we go, so we're always ready to respond.
Are the electric cars with the lithium batteries an issue for you in terms of fire?
It's a different strategy on attacking on extinguishing the fire if you have it, and probably equally as important is being aware of what to cut and what not to cut if you had an accident with one of those, with your volume of
the power that could
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's those are some of the things that as new technology comes up, solar panels are going to become probably something in the next year or two, that type of trend, that's going to be something that we're going to, not solar panels, but just solar technology, how much it's broadening. So those are the things that we'll be looking to bring our members up to the new trends and how to change the techniques of what we used to do so that we don't inadvertently put ourselves at risk and make the situation worse.
Okay. Mary, you had a question?
Hydrogen vapors now rather than gasoline vapors.
You could, yes.
Okay,
I
so
have two
Mary,
quick questions. Do you have any women firefighters?
We do.
You do?
There are four women on the department.
Great, good. The other thing I wanted to ask is I was at Ag Day the other day and a new resident was talking about cell phone coverage and how he was so worried about if there was an active shooter. And I know that your communication devices obviously don't depend upon cell phone coverage, but do you have an opinion about that? And is there anything you can do to help improve our cell phone coverage here? You know it's a safety issue, right? So,
Yeah, I think the cell phone coverage is a problem, clearly. And I know that at the high school, as an example, it's a problem. I actually will let Assistant Chief Latta speak to that a little bit more because his wife is a teacher at the high school and has experienced that cell phone outage when she really needed it. Around the centers, it's a real problem. And, where that concerns me, our radios will work in the centers. That there's no problem with that. We have good radio coverage. But if somebody needs to make a 911 call, there are no more payphones. So they're not going to be able to do it that way. If we are working around the centers, we do rely on cell phone coverage for a lot of our data. If we're doing anything where we need to access databases, we're not going to be able to, often not be able to access them. So I am anxiously awaiting some improvement.
You're not the only one.
You're not the only one, right?
Yeah. Other questions? I wanted to make sure, Linda, since you're on the line, if you had any questions or comments, you could make them.
Yeah, I'm just appreciative of all that we're learning tonight. I guess, and I think I heard a partial answer to this, but I'll ask it in a different way. When you do these offsite regional trainings where you have the wonderful opportunity to be working with your colleagues, how does that affect coverage? I mean, locally?
Good question.
So the answer to that is any of the major training sessions, especially if we do it out of town, or if it's complex enough where the training has everybody committed, there'd be a delayed response, we always find a way to backfill coverage. So, for example, those days where we went to Sudbury for the training, we backfilled the shift coverage for the day. So we never take anybody out of service to do extensive training like that. There's always the day-to-day training that we do, that people are out in your training while you're on duty. And we keep ourselves in service to be able to respond to any call. So we never lose any response capability or any service to the town when we're doing those.
When you say backfill, you mean with your local firefighters?
Yes, yeah, our own firefighters. Yeah, we'll hire the equivalent of a duty shift back on overtime to cover the shift that's going out to do the training, so that we can provide coverage and get that training in.
Sure, okay. And then the other question, every time that there is some incident involving the mass transit, are all of the responses, do they always go to Boston, or do we service any of those locally? Do you understand my question?
MBTA.
No, I'm sorry, if we have an incident.
I don't know what the protocol is for dealing with a safety incident at the MBTA, like we had recently.
Yeah, so I mean, if we have an incident with the transit, that's completely transit authority jurisdiction. We basically treat an accident involving the rail the same as we do with any other accident. We do what we need to do to stabilize the scene, treat the patient as quickly as we can. Generally, there's a lot of trauma involved in those calls, so we need to move them quickly. And more often than not, they will go by helicopter to Boston. I don't know that answered the question. I suspect
it's probably just as much jurisdiction as it is the nature of the trauma, I would guess. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we usually beyond our role as fire EMS, we generally don't get involved in anything else, and we defer everything to the transit because it's all their property.
Yeah.
But if you're working on the tracks, do you have communication with their dispatchers?
We do. Our dispatchers will notify the MBTA. I'm just trying to with Keolis. They'll notify them right away to stop all traffic. Until we have positive confirmation that traffic is stopped, we'll have people assigned to go out, a little distance from the incident facing either way, just to make sure that there's no train traffic coming.
Yeah.
Essentially, yeah. Yep.
And then I think I did want to mention to the fellow select board members that we will have a separate discussion soon on the regional dispatch center proposal, where the chief judge has been a major element. And but we couldn't schedule that tonight, and obviously we didn't have time anyway. We'll bring that back sometime soon. And I'd just like to thank you all and ask if you had anything for us that you'd like from us.
No, I mean, I guess, we I think in the department, I think I'm comfortable speaking for everybody that we feel pretty supported by the town and by the select board. So thank you for that.
Well, we feel supported as well. So thanks very much for your service.
Thank you for letting us know that, because we don't always know from, we don't get involved operationally. So it's really good to find that out. And if anything changes that way, let us know so we can help.
Can I just, I talked a lot. I tend to do that. I would like to, I was going to have Walter speak to this, but I'd like to give him a shameless plug. Over the past couple of years, Walter has written, it's almost like his head is going to get so big he won't be able to get through a door, but he's written a number of really successful grants for us.
Yes.
So yeah,
we like that.
Thank you.
We very much like that. Appreciate it.
Really good.
He was going to speak to all of them, but he's getting up in the range of about $500,000 right now.
Wow.
Okay.
Very good.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so now that takes us back to the liaison reports.
Yes.
And without further ado, I'll just proceed with mine, which was actually other than the middle school building committee that we heard about earlier tonight, there was a meeting of the Comprehensive Sustainability and Energy Committee. And we discussed, first of all, the fossil fuel-free infrastructure process and where we stood. And Chris's memo was very helpful for that. But the other thing that I thought was really interesting was we had a speaker from National Grid who came in and told us about a pilot program that multiple municipalities can participate in, and he was actually encouraging Concord to apply, which is where National Grid would install, typically in the public way, the ground source heat pump wells. And then for an entire neighborhood, or let's say 20 to 40 properties of different types, so commercial and residential properties typically, with the goal of having loads that were distributed at different times during the week and in the season, and then offer that in effect as utility service to households and businesses and of course public buildings in the area. And they had a fee structure, it was a very attractive fee structure for the pilot, at least. And I just thought it was a really intriguing model.
Wow.
If you think about it, with National Grid, that what is their core competency? Well, it's digging trenches and roads and then offering services, right? Now this is a little bit different in that it's actually not just the transmission of natural gas, it's the production of the energy, if you will. And actually, it did strike me that, first of all, that a municipality might feel like they had more of an interest in that aspect. And then secondly, because the net effect of a ground source heat pump is to, there's the medium of the ground source, energy being pumped through, but there's also electricity being expended, and that we have a municipal light plant. So it's almost more core to our municipal light plant's business model to have such a thing than to National Grid's. And so it struck me as something that, gosh, we might even want to investigate from there.
Well,
But
Should we do it at ComAv? Is it too late to do
well,
that?
they're looking for, so they have a variety of criteria, and I think that they're in part trying to align with the Inflation Reduction Act's kinds of goals, right? So one is to try to serve underserved communities. So, I looked at, for example, our public housing facilities, right, as one potential resource. And then they also have parameters around the size. It cannot be too big a system. There are capacity limits.
So does it use their existing infrastructure?
No, I don't think it uses their gas lines or anything.
That's good to know. That
But
would be a
it's,
safety
if you
issue, I think.
think again about this sort of core competency, another core competency is to be able to run major capital projects.
Right.
So if you think about one of the problems that we have with going to sustainable energy is that it's kind of on a single property by single property. The financing is all just individual. If instead you have a big corporation that is financing the whole infrastructure investment and then making it back over time, that's very convenient for residents.
They used to have steam plants, and in
and
the
then
cities,
neighborhood
they would
steam.
have
Sure.
they would have mains that would go to the office buildings
Right.
for their heat, and the steam would be generated in the utility plant.
So
Should
similar
the-
kind of model.
Is the DPW aware of this? Because wouldn't it be coordinated with some of the roads? that
Just
they're-
like, and we would have to
Were they there
approve
at
as
all?
a select board. No, they were not present, but it would be like any of our other, grant of petition, grant of location.
No, but I mean,
types
they
of
would
things.
coordinate it maybe with the roads that
With
they're.
road paving and yes, absolutely.
So you
Yeah.
say they drill these in the public way?
That was what he described.
that
Now, they could also be drilled under a school playground or, they could
condominium
be all
complex.
over. Yeah, they could be a lot of different places, but
Sounds good.
that was still, to me, it's like, well, here's all this land that's not really being used for production. There was one of the big objections to ground source was, well, you have to tear up your lot. Well, why not just tear up the street? I mean, especially if the street's going to be torn up anyway for repaving.
Yes.
And
Very
so,
interesting.
very interesting
Yeah, we'd have to
proposal.
investigate a little more.
Just-
I think I agree with Mary. It'd be really good to have DPW look into it.
I think
I
so.
think there's a lot of safety questions, but I think it's really, really good to see this corporation.
I thought of it
looking
as a
toward the
breakthrough
future.
thinking
Yeah,
in terms
exactly.
of like, well, especially if you're National Grid and you're thinking, well, natural gas is eventually going away.
Right, so they're gonna
Then
go
you got to
in
have
a
a
new
next
direction.
chapter. Well,
Yeah.
here's a
Yeah.
viable next
That's
chapter.
really
Is there a
exciting.
person there that like, the DPW commission is meeting this week, so is there somebody that we
Well,
could?
the guy who came and presented,
Yeah,
yeah.
we.
I
I'll
could
find out.
go find
I'll
it,
find
yeah.
out.
And it's a lot more attractive looking than solar panels.
Well, there's nothing to look at.
That's right.
Yeah. So
So it does.
there's, so
That's cool.
it's, yeah, I thought it was a
That is cool.
really provocative
That's
presentation.
really interesting.
So anyway, that was my liaison
Oh,
report.
we could put it like 100 of them in 229 Main Street.
No, that's the one place we can't put them.
Well,
Well,
you
you
get-
can in certain parts of it.
Okay, but I'm just
In
saying,
the front.
all right. Yes, Linda, do you have a liaison report?
I do. I also attended a meeting with Kate Racer from DHCD to understand what they expect from the town related to any further application for Christopher Heights Junction Village. And we'll hear more about that next Monday, I believe. The Municipal Affordable Housing Trust met again and were updated by Liz Russ on a lot of what had happened at that meeting, as well as some other things in preparation again for the upcoming, that we'll hear about at our select board meeting next week. You may recall that when the superintendent from the national park came in to talk with us a couple weeks ago and referenced that part of the grant that they received from the Great American Outdoors Act included rental of some of their housing property. And there had been some initial conversations in a variety of, with a variety of groups regarding a partnership that the town might have with the national park if we could come together with some kind of program that would allow us to, because these are properties that need to be rented on the market according to their grant. And so she checked with Washington, DC, and we tried to explore, and we did explore whether or not we would be able to work out a program locally. And last week, we decided at the trust that we would thank the superintendent very much for working with us to explore this partnership, but at this time we're probably not going to pursue it any further. We may in the future, but not at this time. It wasn't going to add anything to our SHI, and so there are other priorities we're looking at to do that. And even if we bought down the affordability level that the national park needs to, the line they need to reach in order to bring in the market rate, it was not probably going to be very feasible. So that's where we are on that.
That would be an interesting cash flow
Thanks-
of us
thanks for looking
paying the
into that.
national park.
Really, thank you for looking into that.
Okay. Any other updates?
It's getting late.
Yeah, well, Henry, did you have any liaison remarks you'd like to make?
I could embroider a little bit on Ag Day, which I think was a very successful event. And there are a lot of, what people commented on who were there was the fact that it was really a good opportunity for people to meet with other residents of the town on an informal basis.
Yeah.
And a lot of town, or many town institutions, participated in addition to the agricultural people. It was the library, the League of Women Voters, the Garden Club, and it'd be worthwhile, I think, for us to maybe expand the scope of that a bit for the future, and invite other civic organizations to set up a booth and to have a chance to socialize with our neighbors. Maybe we can try that for the West Concord event on October 15th to, I don't know who actually runs those things, but is it the Agricultural Committee, to which I am the liaison, which is why and I guess I have the.
Well, I think that Discover West Concord Day is, there's a West Concord Business Association, and I'm not sure if
West Concord Advisory Commission.
the advisory committee
And I
is
think the
driving
West
that.
Concord Junction
Cultural
Cultural
District.
Group. But yeah, the Ag Commission runs the Ag
But I
Day.
think why don't we see whether we can get wider participation in some of these events?
Yeah.
Because we've lost a lot of the places where people do meet, like the dump.
Yeah.
And so also I am liaison to the Library Committee, which had two extraordinary functions this past week in honor of the dedication of the Goodwin Forum. There was a kind of a I don't know, it was a forum with Doris Goodwin and John Boynton talking to each other on Wednesday night. And then on Friday night, there was a more formal, Thursday night, I guess, with a more formal dinner, mostly with the donors and sponsors of the library building project there. It was both of those events were really first class. And the 225 committee is, we're meeting with Mike Lawson, who's our representative to the State Commission, on Thursday. We have an event planned for middle of October where we're going to have essentially a plenary session with all of the subcommittee members, not for a non-business meeting, but just a social event so that people can meet each other and get acquainted with each other, because we've got about 50 people covering all different.
Henry, I think it would be good for select board members to come and thank them. I would like to come. Can you just let us know when and where it is?
Yeah, I will. Okay, I'll put you on the list.
Yep.
And I'm working actively to try and get some really first class talent to participate in the events that we're planning for the for 2025.
2250.
For the 250. I think I told you we have a bank account, we have a nonprofit corporation. I'm going through my drawers finding old medals from previous events. I have 14 medals from 50 years ago from the 200th. And I'm going to see whether we can reproduce them and use them as, I think, a fundraising activity.
Oh, sounds great. Okay. I already acknowledged the correspondence that we received this week. Now, is there any public comment? There's no one in the room, so if you're online, if you want to make a public comment, this would be the time. Okay, seeing none, we can adjourn. Thanks very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.